Well, welcome everyone to the August 2nd Medfield Board of Selectmen meeting. Once again, this meeting will be held in hybrid format. Board of Selectmen will attend in person and members of the public may attend in person, and we have several here who are in person. In addition, members of the public who wish to participate via Zoom can do so by joining by one of the options that you'll find. The easiest way to do it is go to the Medfield Town website, call up the agenda for tonight's Board of Selectmen meeting, and the link is there for the Zoom call. There's also a call-in number. And you can get the meeting materials at the website as well. So just a quick reminder, today's meeting is being recorded and broadcast by Medfield TV. So this is live, correct? Live stream? Yes, it is a live stream. So let's hope none of us make any really major faux pas that we wish we could edit out. And for purposes, I think we have mostly all veterans here in the audience. But again, if you do speak, we'll ask you to come up to the podium or use the microphone, the Bill Massaro commemorative microphone, which is always placed close by his seat. It doesn't broadcast your voice or amplify your voice here in the room. It just gets picked up on the audio feed for Medfield TV. So you won't notice any change in how you sound. It's the people watching that'll see that. So at this time, if I could, I'd like to just take a few minutes to spend a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country. Thank you. So I'm thinking about it, perhaps we should take a few minutes in appreciation for members of Congress who are going around the globe doing things presumably on behalf of our country.
Fine.
Yeah, and thank you, Eileen. The other thing I'd like to acknowledge is the recent passing of Chief Ryan, a long-standing fire chief from a couple fire chiefs before you got here, Chief, and basically a long-standing member of the town of Medfield. Beyond his service as a fire chief, he also has served for, I'm not sure how many years, Christine?
As long as I've been here.
As long as Christine's been here, which is more than 20 years as the town greeter. I noticed the write-up, Chief, I'm not sure if you wrote, I'm not sure who wrote the write-up that came through in the email, but it was, there are some people that have lived here in this town for a long time that have contributed to the town, not all of whom I've met, even though I've been here for 25 years, that have obviously made an impression with their personality and their general outlook on life and their general commitment to their contribution to the town. And it was very clear that Chief Ryan was one of them. So his funeral, for anyone who's interested, is 10 o'clock on Thursday morning at St. Edward's. And I also got an email from the Legion that then will be a ceremony at Vine Lake Cemetery at 11 o'clock for anyone who's so inclined.
He had the perfect personality to be the town greeter. He was just incredibly gregarious. I remember seeing him somewhere. I think it was a concert of somebody or others. Must have been a Memo concert maybe at the gazebo. And I just remember seeing him dancing away by himself. And
Heck
he
of
was
a
just so
dancer.
happy.
Right,
Classic ballroom dancer.
That's nice.
there you go. And I missed that. But, at any rate, sorry to see that he has passed on, but also grateful for all he's done for the town over the years. Okay. The first appointment we have is with Marion Benaldi, our town clerk. So, Marion, take it away.
Okay, so there's a couple things to talk about. Here we go with election season. We have the primary on September 6th coming up. So we would like to, I believe in the packet is the early voting schedule that I proposed for the town that I'd like to get out to everybody. So that's one thing. The second thing is the warrant that I need signed so that I can get that posted. To appoint the election workers and the warden, Tracy Clank. And that is for early voting and the election. And then the last item would be that part of the Boats Act, which was signed in June, the legislation changed a bit that in terms of police detail for early voting and for the election, that for some reason the legislation changed from the police chief to the Board of Selectmen. And I'm asking for you to vote it back, because in terms of coordination with the details, it's something that I coordinate with the chief of police. So not that I don't want your input, I certainly would be happy to have it. It's just that it seems that it would be going from me to you, back to me to Michelle, you know, it's just kind of adding another cook to the kitchen, so to speak. So there, with that Votes Act, there were a few changes that happened with the legislation. But the short answers are that, you know, basically the vote by mail is here to stay. It was something that was started in 2020. It looks like it's going to, they voted it to be permanent. They've changed the last day of registration deadline from 20 days to 10 days. There's other things in there. The deadline for a vote by mail ballot, it used to be 4 days, now it's 5 business days in terms of requesting one. There's little nuances, but the main thing is that the vote by mails are here to stay.
Will there be a summary on our website for citizens that may be asking what will be the difference between the last election and this election, so that they can appreciate some of the data points you just shared?
I'm happy to put something together, you know, in that vote, the early vote, I'm going to put some information on there to make sure that people are ready when they come. Early voting will be happening here
Okay.
on the second floor, and we're following the requirements. Actually, we're doing more early voting that's required, but I can certainly put some touch points on there that kind of break down the, you know, the high-level overview
Yes.
of the Vote Act. If you'd like me to do something like that, that's fine.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happening in terms of the police detail is that the 150-foot rule, which used to just apply to election day, is actually extended now to also to early voting.
Good.
Which means that nobody, on the days that we have early voting here, both for the primary and the state election in November, there cannot be anybody campaigning within 150 feet of Town Hall.
Good.
Can't wear T-shirts, ball caps, those types of things to come in to vote. It used to be kind of a gray area with early vote, but that got changed to the regular one.
Does that mean individual voters can't do that? Or is it-
Correct.
So no one can wear anything?
Correct.
It relates to that election or issues in it.
Right,
Anybody, yeah.
as opposed to someone who's campaigning for a particular issue or, it's not the ones who are advocating, it's even anybody coming to vote.
It's a 150-foot rule is anybody that's coming in within 150 feet of this building cannot be campaigning in any way. So you can't have a T-shirt on for somebody that's on the ballot, ball cap. You can't have people outside holding signs or, you know, that type of thing. Anything that would influence the vote, I guess is the way it's stipulated.
No ball caps that say, I belong to the NRA and I vote, or anything like that.
No.
I see you pushing the rules here. I think you're
Well,
planning.
she took all her opportunity to wreak any mischief with the people that are gonna be managing it, so you have to take
No.
advantage of the opportunities when they come up.
That's right.
Okay.
But that's about it.
Okay,
Okay.
let me see then. So I think what we are looking at doing is first, voting to sign the election warrant for the state primary on September 6th, if we have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then we'll do that.
You need a pen?
Purple. That passed. Second. We have been asked to vote, and I think this is 2 votes. One is to vote for the warden. Tracy Klink as warden of the state primary election to be held on Tuesday, September 6th, for precincts 1 through 4. Get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second vote is a request to vote to appoint the following list of inspectors, and unless I have to, I won't read all the names, but it'll be the names that are on the agenda packet Something on the order of, it looks like about 20 inspectors for the state primary election to be held Tuesday, September 6, 2022, as well as early voting to be held at the town hall from August 27th, 2022 through September 2nd, 2022.
I would say the safe thing is to read them.
Read them. The proposed inspectors are James Feeney, Linda Kimball, Laura Mulready, Linda Frawley, Bill Southwick, Teresa Knapp, Heidi Erickson, Robert Costello, Andrea Sullivan, Joanne LaFrancesca, Molly Sliney, Sharon Tatro, Kim Price, Joe Kalo, Wendy Ayer, Christine Alessi, Rose Tebow, Annette Wells, and Heidi Erickson.
Is that a typo, or are there actually two Heidi Ericksons?
It's possible that it's a
There's-
typo. Is there two listed?
There
Yeah.
are two listed.
There's only one.
Okay.
Thank you. So,
She does the work of
She
two.
does the work of 10,
scratch the
but
second Heidi Erickson, and kudos to Eileen for listening so closely.
No, I saw that earlier.
Caught that.
There could be two of them in town, you never know.
There could be. Okay, I have a motion.
I so moved.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye, aye.
Okay, both of those are passed.
okay.
And then the final request from Marion is to ask the Board of Selectmen to vote to delegate the authority given to them in Section 13 of Chapter 92 of the Acts of 22, otherwise known as the Vote Act, to detail sufficient number of police officers or constables for each building that contains the polling places for one or more precincts that every election therein, to preserve order and to protect the election officers and supervisors from interference with their duties and to aid in enforcing the laws relating to elections. Delegate all that to the police, to Chief of Police.
Yes.
So as much as it hurts me to give up any powers that are given to me by statute, I would so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
You've taken all the fun out of the election.
I'm
for us,
sorry.
Really.
We'll give you something else.
Okay.
Good. Good luck with it.
We have, if you can let us put one thing in front here, we have Justin Diamond here from Trinity Solar, I think just asking for permission to be able to solicit in the coming months. So what we thought, unless, you see how much fun our Board of Selectmen is, so perhaps you would like to stay. You don't have to leave just because we've got.
Just for fun after, I don't mind going first.
All right, well, so in that case, why don't we let you, if you want to just come up, briefly explain what you're asking for?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So it is a public hearing, so you need to
Thank
declare it
you.
open.
Thank you. I hereby announce or declare this public hearing is now open. Thanks. One of these days I'll get that.
Okay, so the goal here, I work for Trinity Solar. We're one of the larger installers in the Northeast. We're looking to meet with homeowners and ideally save them money with solar, help the environment, and gain independence for energy. So I'm not sure specifically what it is you're looking for here, but I'm looking for permission to solicit, go door to door, knock doors for good houses for solar.
We
Eileen
need
will-
days, times,
well-
and time period.
I think this is the one I asked. Let me just see real quick. So you're asking for 6 months. Do you really think it's going to take 6 months, or could you do it in 3?
So it's not going to take 6 months, but typically I'll work through an area, and then a lot of people from that first area are going to say yes. Half the people I knock the door, nobody's going to answer, and then some people are not going to be very interested. That first group of people, when they're into it, they're going to sign up, and then a couple months later when we do the installs, I'll go back to the area, talk to everybody again, try to speak to the people I didn't meet the first time.
Okay.
So it's not that I'm going to go straight through 6 months, but I would like that if possible.
Okay. No, I understand the reasoning for that. I understand that. Thanks.
And the comment on hours before, during the week, I typically work later in the day because most people work 9 to 5. Knocking hours would be between about 2 and 7.
Okay. And then you said something at the end. So you'll know homes that are facing a direction that it's beneficial for the homeowner versus one that you're not going to go push on something that they're not going to really get the benefit.
Correct. So specifically with our company, our program, it's a symbiotic relationship most of the time that we do it. That means it has to be a good site for solar for us to do the project. Other companies, they'll absolutely knock houses that are not good for solar. They'll sell a system and it might not work for the homeowner and they don't care. That is not at all what we're doing.
Do you do anything before you actually get to the neighborhood to give the neighbors a heads up that you have analyzed this from Google Maps or whatever, that their home would be a good fit and you'll be in the area?
I've never done that, but I'm open to figuring out a way to do that if it's something the board would like to see. Typically, I will look at a satellite before I go down. I'll pick an area, say, okay, there's 6 good houses on this street. I'm going to go knock them and see if anyone's home.
Okay. I think it's interesting if you do that.
Mhm.
If you have a neighbor and then you skip the next one, just say, like, listen, if your neighbor happens to see their house isn't designed, so I'm not going to push something on them. I think that adds value to what you're offering.
I appreciate the note. That's definitely
No,
how
I mean,
I do it. I drive. I'm going to be very honest. I drive house to house. I do not walk. Typically, there's not that many good houses in one area.
Okay. Yeah. Because I have neighbors that'll say, okay, that guy just blew by 3 houses, but I wonder why. That adds credibility to your business. If you're not looking just to get money, you're doing it for all the right reasons. And
You
to be
can't be
efficient.
paid as a consultant, you know that.
Notice you only do this when you're a rookie, and then as this time goes by, you're like, yeah.
I'm very excited for your installation next month.
All right, I will pass the baton. Yes.
Pete?
What were the dates that you were looking for? Starting when to when?
If we could begin as soon as possible, I'd like a 6-month period, but I'm open to working with you guys however you see fit.
I think August is quiet in Medfield, so you might find it a little bit beneficial to come back like towards the end of August when double sessions and everything gets underway.
You definitely could be correct. I'm sure there's probably still people around the area, but summer's really good for our business. I like being outdoors when it's like this.
I was going to say, door to door in January or February, trying to sell solar panels is probably a little.
It's about
tough.
closing the deal,
Different
though.
proposition, right?
Yeah.
And what days of the week?
So I'd like the flexibility, and it's not that it's going to be 6 days every week, but Monday through Saturday if possible. Monday through Friday would be those later hours that I mentioned before. Saturday would be 9 to 5. Sunday I will leave alone.
Okay, so in your application, you'd included Sunday, and I kind of flagged that as, not sure that's a great day, so not Sundays.
I put it on there just for flexibility, but typically Sunday I'm only going to meet with somebody I've already met with. That's
Yeah.
going to be a one-off thing.
I think there's no problem with you doing that if you've got work you're doing for somebody.
Right.
I would think you might be well advised not to do this, not to do solicitation on Sundays, because I think that's probably an uphill battle. But,
Speaking from experience, you're correct.
Di- Is it unreasonable if we limit you to daylight hours?
So
Right.
my concern with that would be that the daylight hours are going to be waning the next few months.
They
They're going
do.
to get earlier and earlier,
Yeah.
but people are still working the same hours. So if I say start cutting my hours at 5 o'clock when it gets dark out, I might not talk to anybody that's a decision maker.
Right.
7 o'clock I've found is typically okay with most homeowners. Even during the winter, you might get a couple things where somebody says it's dark out, but
Yeah.
I try to be well lit. I have a lanyard that has lights on it, things like that.
So it's 2 to 7?
That would be the hours I'm looking for during the week, yeah.
Do we have a policy about times on this sort of thing, or is 2 to 7 work?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's I think, when I think about the comments that I've seen from people, you'll probably know if you're showing up too late. Because
Yes.
people will let you know. So it's not like, and it'll show up in one of two ways. One would be, people are going, who is that person out in my dark driveway, going around my yard? And that often turns into calls to the police. So one thing I think you probably know is let the police know what part of town you're working. So when they get those calls, they can, don't just go into an area unannounced, because they will get the calls if they see people based on past experience.
Right.
Beyond that, I guess 2 to 7,
Yep.
it's not probably past anybody's bedtime, so you're probably okay with it.
And Chris, are we okay with 6 months?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
The only question I'd have on that is, are you really going to be doing something in January? Like right now, if you started in August, 5 months is the end of December. So,
Much less. It's definitely something that when we get the installs going, I go to every single install that morning. I warn all the neighbors there's going to be some work. Here's my card in case you need anything. And at the same time, I'll recanvass. I'll go back to that neighborhood and I'll talk to people again if I didn't speak to them the first time.
well, I don't have a problem with 6 months.
Nor do I. I understand the
Your
rationale.
call. You want to do that in January. Mark?
Yes, through the chair. So I just want to make it clear, it's you alone doing the canvassing?
At this point in time, absolutely just me. The only thing that could happen down the road, I may be asked to train somebody and they would just observe. If that's okay, they would have to pass a background check to work with our company, and they wouldn't be doing any business, they wouldn't be doing really anything other than observing.
You'd have to come back if there was somebody actually out independently canvassing.
Questions, Pete?
No, that's it for me, thank you.
Just one question on your business itself. Are the kinds of installs you do, are they the ones that basically say, listen, we'll come in, we'll do this for free for you, and you'll get the benefit of the electricity, and we get benefit from it? Or are you actually literally doing an install that people pay you for that they then own?
So it's both.
Both.
We do offer both, but the bulk of our work is the no-cost version that you're talking about. So this is why I have to find good sites, otherwise that simply wouldn't work.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So I had, first you had your weight down here as 16 or 1 gram. I wasn't sure what it is. I assumed something
165.
close to 165, okay.
I thought it was maybe stones.
And then I had this figured out, because it said hair, and what you put was N/A. And I said, well, he's either bald or, so you've answered my question there. And outside of that, the only questions I had was around the length of time and the hours and Sundays. So we drop Sundays off, it's 2 to 7 for weekday hours. I don't see any problem with 9 to 3 on Saturday. That probably is a good.
9 to 5, I think he said.
Do you say 9 to 5? or 9
So
to
I
3?
asked for 9 to 5. If you guys have to cut it at 3, that's fair. We'll do that.
No, it was your handwriting that I read wrong. I don't have a
That's
problem
also understandable. I could have been a doctor if it was just based on handwriting.
Okay, so it's 9 to 5. Okay. That doesn't bother me. Okay. No more questions? Any questions from the audience? I'm not sure maybe you have. Do we have any questions from the crowd? Not sure. Oh, that's just
No.
me. I'm not actually in a privileged position, Eileen, so you can.
Nope.
Oh, there we go. Now I'm gonna be. Can't see this here. That's because I forgot to log in at the start. Do we have anybody check? Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'm checking, there's nothing.
Okay. No questions. Okay. I will therefore declare this public hearing closed. And at this point, we'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we grant, the town grant a solicitor license to Justin Diamond of Trinity Solar for the 6 months commencing today, for the days Monday through Saturday, and on those days, 2 to 7 p.m. on Mondays through Friday, Saturdays 9 to 5 p.m.
Second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you're all set. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question, is that going to be a paper copy of a license? Do you guys do an actual permit or just good to go?
You're good to go. We just ask that you check in with the police chief every day.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. All right, now, Chief, you're next.
You got up too early, chief.
At the same time, I always get up.
Oh.
In a different direction. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to come in and talk about the fire department for the next 2.5 hours. Oh, I don't have 2 hours? Okay. All right, so one of the things Christine had asked me to come in and give an operational update. And I figured since we are at the end of the fiscal year, it's really good to give you kind of a snapshot of what happened over the last 12 months. Fiscal year 22, we had 1,363 incidents, 586 ALS transports that generated close to $438,000, 207 BLS transports, which generated $105,000. We received mutual aid 70 times, and we gave mutual aid 82 times. So we're actually providing more mutual aid than we take in. We had 238 box alarms. If you remember, box alarms are used to handle second medicals, fires, larger events, things that can't be handled with the duty shift. So we call off-duty members and call members. They come in, and then we handle the calls. We averaged 6.2 members per box alarm, which included the 3 men on duty. The average response rate of full-time firefighters is 2% on recalls. Overall, average response rate for the call force is 28%. 5 call members had 57% call rate. 5 call members had a 21% call rate, and 5 call members had a 6% call rate. So you can see we're still having problems with getting people engaged and getting them to come back. A lot of that is people who live out of town, work day jobs, have, like landscapers working 70 hours a week. People who get to go on vacation and have fun. That's not me. Ambulance 2 was dispatched 84 times, 60 second medicals. We had 4 third medicals. We had 3 medicals going on at the same time. And we had 30 mutual aid ALS ambulance transports, which basically equated to a $66,000 loss in revenue because we couldn't support the ambulance calls with those second ambulance calls. We had 1 full-time firefighter leave in his probationary period, and we currently have a firefighter that replaced him graduating from the fire academy, the State Fire Academy on Friday.
Oh, wow.
We currently have 1 AFG grant outstanding. It's a AFG grant for portable radios, and I'm waiting for an equipment grant for 7 sets of fire gear, which we got towards January. So I was told there's an 8-month wait for fire turnout gear. So it's kind of crazy, but everything's coming back to supply shortages and whatnot. Capital purchases. I have a capital item for radios, but I'm going to wait until I hear about the AFG grant because I'm not going to need all of that money to purchase radios if we get the grant. The AEDs that were on the capital list have been ordered. For future. Maintaining an active call force is something that we need to continue. We also need to consider staffing the 4th member to provide a second ALS ambulance, because right now I can only provide 1 ALS ambulance. A staffing option for that is going for the SAFER grant, which is the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. It would provide 4 full-time firefighters at 3 years of no cost to the town. It covers salaries and benefits, and it does not cover equipment and overtime. So you're going to see a request come across my desk because that application period is going to open up December, January, and I'm going to make an official request to the board to apply for that grant. It is obviously your option. If it's not supported, then it will not be supported at the federal level. One of the benefits of having another medic on each group, obviously, I'll be able to provide the 2 trucks out the door. So when we go mutual aid, or let's say if you're having a cardiac event in Medfield and then another incident comes in, we can handle it in-house. We don't have to call mutual aid. It keeps ALS in town, and then we meet compliance with 2 in and 2 out in the event that we have an IDLH atmosphere. So if you're going to go into a building fire like we have this morning, technically I'm supposed to have 2 firefighters outside in order to rescue the 2 guys that go in if there's a problem. So, the fire alarm monitoring issue. The fire department is still operating a central station monitoring point for 66 locations. That support for the software ends in January of 2024. I brought that to your attention the last time I was here. The cost of a new system is $70,000. I still can't find a vendor, and I understand it's something that we've had in town for a long time, but we're going to have to look at getting rid of it and giving it off and telling people you have to find your own monitoring, especially if we ever look at going to a regional dispatch center in the long range. And that's all I have, and I'm open to your questions.
Well, I was lucky enough to sit with Bill about 2, maybe 3 months ago when I first came on, so a lot of what you just shared, I can certainly appreciate. And when I listen to your need for ALS and I think of all of the new developments coming into Medfield, I look forward to the January timeframe when you're able to submit that, because I think we can then look at where are we with the state hospital project. We've got Aura, we've got what's going. There's definitely an increase of residents and potential needs. So worth it.
One of the things that I look around, you have Westwood, Walpole, Norfolk, Millis, Medway, all have second ALS ambulances. It's definitely, it's in the long-range plan you have to do, and we have to get the 4th guy, and that's the only way it's going to happen. One of the things is we had one of our new hires actually moved to 89 Pleasant Street, so he's actually in town. He's been coming back on recall.
Oh, great.
He's actually been coming back quite a bit. So, but he's a paramedic, but one paramedic's not going to do it on 24/7 basis. So.
And then how are you doing, like, when I was with you, we were looking at some of the equipment that was being worked on by, I think, over in Foxborough. Everything coming back in stock and all the parts you need, everything good?
Well, no.
No? Okay.
Squad 4 is still out of service. We had a problem with the fuel injection system, which we fixed and replaced. Then we discovered that the pump impeller and the pump shaft were damaged somehow. So Hale is the maker of the pump, and we're waiting for an impeller. So the impeller is what spins around and pushes the water, which sends it down to the hose. That part has been back ordered, so our truck has been sitting over in Foxborough ever since.
Wow.
And I've been getting weekly updates from the mechanic over there, and you know, they feel bad because they want to get the truck back in service. But luckily, one of the things that happened is finally the Ford F-350 Brush 1 came in, and I was able to put that in service. So technically, I've kept the old truck, and I have the new one, just so I still have 2 brush trucks operational. But as soon as that Squad 4 gets back, I'm going to take the old brush truck offline, and I'm going to give that to Highway.
Good. Okay. I'm good. Thank you.
Chief, one of the things that I really liked when you first came here was you reached out to the young people in town and invited them to become some sort of interns. You had a special process for people that were interested in firefighting.
Yep.
Are you still doing that? How's that working out? I know you have trouble finding people.
Well, what we did was we've run the program our 3rd year. Liam Frazier was one of the members of the 2nd class, I believe. It might have been the 1st class. He's now a call firefighter with the department.
Excellent.
He's going to be going to EMT school in the next 12 months. Matter of fact, he is one of the extremely active call firefighters, so he's on the high end of that. He comes back to everything. So once we get him, you know, EMT trained, then he'll be fully operational to be able to do all the jobs that we have. But still, it's not paramedic level of service.
Yeah, but he could run the 2nd ambulance when you need to run the...
Yeah, he could be a driver for the 2nd ambulance if,
Yep.
if we have an ALS call.
Yeah.
You know, right now, the people that are coming back, I'm getting the same 3 or 4 guys on every 2nd medical. And not being EMTs, you know, they go to the scene, they render care that they can, but I'm not going to send 2 ambulances to the hospital. So I'm going to hand that patient off to the ALS company, and then they're going to run to the hospital. In the same respect, when we go mutual aid, I need to take that patient. I want to take the patient so we get the full amount of revenue. We're not splitting the cost. And the mutual aid companies we kind of just have this agreement with the different departments. So that's pretty much the way we operate. But to get back to your point with the fire cadet program, it will be up and running September again. If not, probably October, November.
Okay, great. So that what you just talked about got into the second question I had, which was about the 2nd ambulance and the times when you can't run it. And I guess you're just saying that that's just a staffing issue?
Well, it needs to be ALS, Advanced Life Support. We know we had the whole fight that we had back in 2018 to get ALS up and running.
Yeah.
And part of the plan was to looking downrange and saying, okay, we need to get another paramedic on board after this first round of hiring so we can actually have the 2 trucks operational. Mm-hmm. You know, once we get 2 trucks operational, we'll be golden. You know, we'll be able to support ourselves. You know, once you get 2 and 3 calls deep, once you get 3 calls deep, it's just a roll of the dice because you're going to have other companies coming in. But you know, that's like a thing we really have to focus on in the next year.
So when you say we'll be golden, that means in terms of providing the service, but also
Yes.
the revenue?
Yeah, all the revenue will be coming back to us. So now you'd be getting 2 ALS units, you know, generating revenue.
Yeah. And how does the revenue generation compare to the cost of adding the extra people?
Well, it's never going to be self-sufficient.
Okay.
But in the end result is to providing a service to the community and taking care of our own, which is where we want to be. You know, obviously, when we get deep with medicals, you know, we have to rely on our mutual aid partners. But, you know, sometimes it makes me nervous when we go to Dover and we'll be there ALS, and then here in Medfield, another call comes in, so I'm calling Millis, Westwood, Walpole. You know, we should be able to do that ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So we don't do the 2nd ambulance if it's just an EMT?
No, we will. So what will happen is, say we go to Dover on a cardiac issue over there. Another medical comes in. So say it's a cardiac event here in Medfield. We'll put the box alarm on, we'll tone out the staff, the ambulance, they'll show up. Now what happens is, depending on the acuity of a call, so if it's something like somebody sprained their ankle, so we're not going to call ALS unless we need pain management, okay? So if it's another cardiac event, obviously I need to have paramedics looking at that patient to diagnose and treat. And that's where I have to go with mutual aid. And the two guys that I have who are basic EMTs cannot provide ALS service.
Okay, so the second ambulance has two
Correct.
EMTs on it instead of a paramedic.
Correct.
Yeah, all right. Then that gets into the issue that you were talking about, the SAFER grant. And that would be to add the fourth person to your staff.
We'll add 4 additional firefighters. There'd be trained paramedics. They have to be paramedics by contract. And then also be trained firefighters.
And if we add 4 to the department, then that gets us a fourth person for every shift?
4 men on every group, or 4 firefighters on every group.
Yeah, okay.
So I'd have, right now I have minimum of 2 on every group with an EMT. You know, some groups have, there's 2 captains that are paramedics, and there's 2 captains that are EMTs. So.
What's the breakdown now between EMTs and paramedics in your department in terms of numbers?
Well, we have,
How many EMTs do we still have?
well, we have 8 paramedics and 4 EMTs.
Oh, okay, all right. We're getting there,
We're getting there.
yeah.
You know, once I add that 4th guy to the groups, it will be, you know, we'll be able to get that
Do
truck on the road
everything
all the
then, yeah,
time.
just about, yeah.
You know, and one of the things I've heard as well, you're not going to use the call firefighters as much. Well, that's not true. Because depending on what's going on, I still need bodies to show up. We still, like we had the fire we had this morning, we had a better turnout today than we had on Evergreen Way. And Evergreen Way, we had 6 call members, 5 call members show up, and today we had 9. So we had a better turnout. But then again, you know, it's the July 4th week, and people were gone, but fires don't wait for, you know, they happen on holidays too.
And then the last question that I had to do with the software, the monitoring software that runs out in
Yep.
a year and a half. There's just no software to run the monitoring, or is it okay if we just stop monitoring? What are the?
Well, what would happen is we would have to tell those customers that we have that you have to find another central station monitoring point. Because right now, what happens is the fire alarm goes off in a building. Fire alarm goes off in the town hall. It shows up in dispatch, and then dispatch says, okay, we have a box alarm at this address, and they dispatch us. So what will happen is that software is not going to get supported anymore. So if there's a problem behind the scenes with the internet connection, the program itself, it's going to not be operational, and they're not going to support it. I did look at a company, Natale. You may have heard of them, and you might not have. They're another vendor out there. They wanted to provide us software that was $70,000 to replace what we have, and the actual product that we were looking at was not user-friendly. And something has to be user-friendly. But if we're going to go, you know, looking long range, and we're going to be moving to a regional dispatch center, or if there's the possibility of that, it's better to tell them to get rid of it now and find another vendor to monitor your house or your building.
So what you just said created 2 more questions for me, if you'll indulge me.
No.
Regional dispatch, where is that? I saw that you had been talking to people. Where is that stand?
Right now, it is a wish that I continuously remind the town administrator about.
Daily.
Daily. And until we have some issues behind the scenes corrected, it'll be on the back burner.
And then the last issue for me is I have a memory that the fire department ran some fiber optic cables around town, maybe for that monitoring?
A long time ago, it was all wire-based communications. Now it has since gone to radio boxes.
All
So
right, so we don't have that any longer.
you'll still see some red lines up on the poles, but it's not in active service
Okay,
anymore.
thank you, sir. Sir.
Let me pick up on box alarms. This is partly for, I think, the public's benefit as well. But maybe it ties into the monitoring that you're talking about. When you talk about businesses that have monitoring and there's a box alarm, I think a box is still, may not be exactly the same, but it used to be there were boxes on telephone poles and things like that, and people pulled the,
Well,
that's the
you
box?
have a master box, which is
Yep.
the old one that used to see that you'd pull a
Right.
handle.
Right.
A lot of those have been phased out. There are some communities that still have them. But what it is that your fire alarm system is now connected to a radio box. The radio box sends a signal to the fire department receiver, and then it shows up on the computer screen.
Okay.
So what happens is we put it in as a box. It would be box like 451, 421, you know, whatever the number is, which kind of gives us an identifier of where it is in town.
So here's my question. So it still is kind of a box, and the advantage of the box is it tells the fire department exactly where the
Yep.
call's coming in from, whether anybody's called or not. If in current box alarms, when one goes off, is that an automatic thing, like it's a fire detection system that spots a fire and automatically sends it?
Yeah,
or
it's
is-
your smoke detector activates,
Right.
sends a signal to your fire alarm.
Yep.
The fire alarm sends it to the communicator, which transmits a signal based on the coding that it receives within the programming, and
Yep.
that's what shows up on the computer screen.
Okay, so if we tell people that are currently covered by that kind of a notification system that's directly connected to the fire department, that they have to go out and find a monitoring system on their own, is that like you hire some company that's a monitoring system and the message goes to them and then they'll call the fire department?
Yep.
So it's kind of putting a second leg in the loop?
Yeah, it ultimately, you could see up to a 30 to 45-second delay in the call.
That's where I was going with that,
Yep.
okay. And they can do that? You can do that, they would be able to do that just by signing up for a service.
Yeah, they would have to
It's not gonna
contract
cost
with a
them
company.
$70,000 to do that, it's the whole system that you were looking at that was gonna be $70,000 to,
Yeah, right now, I think Wilkins Glen just switched over one of their buildings, and it was like $300, because they actually went to a mobile device. So they have a mobile unit which replaced the radio box, which just sends a cell phone signal to the receiving point, and then they call us.
okay.
It was actually, at first I didn't know if it was a legitimate option under NFPA 72, the fire alarm code. But actually, there's more and more people switching over to, that cell phone technology because it's becoming more and more reliable.
Okay. And this is a dumb question, I'm sure, but I'm gonna ask it. There's no good reason why we would want to get into the notification service by saying, well, it's gonna cost us $70,000 to buy a new system, but you all are gonna have to take out a subscription service with the town to cover that 70, there's no,
Right now, we charge everyone $180 annually to provide the service.
okay. And that collectively wouldn't be enough to cover a $70,000 capital expense?
I would have to collect it for several years in order to build it up, in order to pay for it.
Okay,
One of the things is I just upgraded the system about 2 years ago, and I went from a DOS-based system to a digital system. And then it was about 18 months after that happened that I was notified that they're not going to support that programming anymore.
okay.
I'm
Okay.
shocked that we had a DOS-based system in your tenure here. That's
We had
old
that's-
technology.
Yeah, it was, and, it was still working, so.
Yeah, all right.
And then my other question, this is the warrant committee member and me coming out here, and a little bit going back to the ALS study committee that first came up, and I just off the top of my head, I don't have the numbers. What I think I heard you say is we generated, round numbers, 400,000 in revenues with ALS.
Yep,
Another 100,000 in revenues with, non-ALS EMS type stuff.
correct.
And we had to send out 66,000 from mutual aid that went out the door. So $500,000 less 66,000, over 400,000 in revenues. I'm trying to remember when we first looked at ALS with the study committee, it sticks in my mind that the projection on the revenues was 200,000?
50,000.
150,000. So I wanted, that's noteworthy to say, when we made the first decision to do this, to get the single person on that could do ALS.
Yep.
We were basing that on 150,000 net revenue. We're at almost 3 times that net revenue. So as we're thinking about bringing in a fourth one now so that we can run a second ALS ambulance,
Yes.
just for anybody who's out there thinking about, gee, I don't know if that's a good idea. Quite aside from the public safety side of it in terms of our ability to respond to emergencies, which is more important, from a financial standpoint, it's already been a whole lot better than the deliberately pessimistic or conservative view that we put out before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just real quick, today, had a building fire. Came in at 5:07 a.m. It's probably going to be a total loss for the property. The people have not moved to Medfield yet. They were scheduled to move in next week.
Wow.
I had a conversation with the homeowner already. She should be arriving from Wisconsin tonight. The house is being boarded up. We had 2 medicals going on at the same time as the building fire. We got back to the station, went to Dover, and then we had another box alarm for a second medical that came in. Right now, our engine just went to Norfolk for station coverage because of a second alarm fire in Norwood.
Wow.
So today has been a very busy day for the fire department.
Indeed.
But everybody's okay. I had heard that somebody.
We had 3 injuries at the fire today. 2 were treated on scene, 1 was transported, dehydration. I picked him up about 2 hours after he got quite a bit of fluid and he was feeling better. And
Oh, good.
And again, for clarification, those 3 injuries were fire department personnel.
those were there was one firefighter from Millis who had sustained burns to his arm, but it was minor. We had one firefighter with an inhalation issue where he inhaled something, some kind of debris, and then once again we had the dehydration. So it's just a good excuse to let everybody know, make sure you hydrate in this hot weather.
And a reminder what public safety people do for the town.
Yes.
Exactly, more importantly.
Good. Thank you, Chief. This was great.
I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Get it. Questions from the
Oh,
floor?
yes.
Very basic. Chris Potts, 7 Curve Street. Any public service messages for the town?
I would not have a fire at your house. With the dry weather, we're supposed to have projected 99 degrees on Friday and Thursday. So I would probably ask you to stop having fires at your house until we get some significant rain. I think that's probably the most important thing right now. It's extremely dry out there. The water levels are dropping, and it just makes our job a little more difficult.
So, Chief, every night on the news, you see these fires in California and Arizona, New Mexico, and Massachusetts just never seems to have those.
Yeah, one of the things out in California that I want to say it's like chaparral brush. It has an oil that's the same consistency of gasoline.
Oh, wow.
So everything's really dry right now, especially out there. They've been hit with some terrible droughts. So it just takes one little fire and then it just takes off out there.
So our conditions in Massachusetts just are such that we're not going to have those sorts of fires.
At one point, somebody had told me we have like the 3rd highest fire danger in the country. You know what, it's typically, you'll see that in the spring when you have the red flag days. If you ever see the news and you're having red flag days, low humidity, winds coming out of the southwest, that's when we really get nervous with what's happening. But, you know, this weather out here is just, it's crazy for right now. You know, we shouldn't be as dry as we are.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's bothersome.
Yeah.
And you have to think, now, if I have to, draft, or if I have to grab water from like a static water source, a pond or a river, everything's lower than it should be. So that even limits my ability to get water. So.
There wasn't anything with these 2 house fires, was anything in common?
There is no similarities between the 2 house fires. We believe there's 2 completely different origins.
Scary.
Yeah.
And do we share dispatch for fire and police?
We have a public safety dispatch that dispatches fire and police.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Chief.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Get some rest.
You guys have a good night.
You too.
Thanks for your long day, sir.
Oh, yeah.
I hope to not talk to you at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Good night.
Yeah.
Take care, Chief. All right, I think the next item, Chief Garrett, discuss special police officers and request the appointment of retired police officer Christine Natale as a special police officer. She's joining us by...
She's joining us via Zoom. Yep.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Chief.
First, I just want to confirm that Chief Carrico doesn't do anything fun ever. In line with that statement. Thank you for letting me join via Zoom tonight. My daughter was kind enough to share her cold with me this week, and I didn't think you guys would appreciate the gift that keeps on giving. I'm not sure what's up with my screen. I actually can't see any of you. Are you able to?
We can see 2 of you.
We can see
We're not, we actually stopped putting our videos on. You could if you want.
Well, as long as you can hear me. Thank you very much for tabling the special police officer appointment a couple of weeks ago. You may or may not know that through police reform, we have some new steps that we have to take for our officers that we didn't previously have to do. So one of those steps that we have to take is to have the police officers certified through post-commission. Because Officer Dean Natale retired prior to her recertification. Her certification expired and we had to reapply for it again. I thought I could slip her in with the rest of my recertifications, but Post actually required us to go through the process independently. She and I met, we did an interview, and then I spoke to her on the phone to get the rest of her information. That all went through and she received her certification July 25th. So I respectfully request the board at this time to appoint her as a special police officer, which will enable her to have police powers to perform details and road shifts, which is now a requirement under the post-commission.
Eileen, any questions?
No, that helped clarify some of the questions we had a few weeks ago, so that helps.
No questions, Chief. Thank you for being with us tonight.
So I only have one question, Chief, and it has to do with the policy that you provided in the packet. And this is for all the Scrabble players out there in the town. What is superannuation?
We have to have it, and it's actually language that I need to discuss with the attorneys who've added in the post language for us. We currently have 5 specials that we're not former police officers with the town, because we don't want to limit ourselves. I have to put my glasses on to read it in its context, but I did have it pulled up and available.
See, this would be just great for somebody who's playing Scrabble and the word super is on the board and you're trying to clear your rack. Knowing that you could put annuation on the end of super and really score big is sort of a big deal.
Now, is that council put together this language and not a lowly police chief? Can you direct me to what line it is?
Oh, it's the second page, under procedures, item number 6. Must have been a regular Medfield police officer who retired based on superannuation.
I actually had to Google
Oh,
that to
yes,
see what
just
it
through a
meant.
normal retirement, so not as part of a separation agreement or some issue with the town.
Ah, okay, okay. Well, it was a great Scrabble word, but you have to know what it is, because somebody will challenge you on a word like that, so, okay.
It's not my word, and obviously I needed the context to give it to you, but that is something that I would like to discuss before we put the policy in place. We have 5 fabulous special police officers who worked for us that were not previously policemen with the department. This was commonplace in the state to have specials that have only gone through the modified reserve academy. These officers have taken it upon themselves with their own time and money to go ahead and attend the Bridge Academy and complete their 800 hours so that they can continue to work for us. I thought it was real dedication shown on their part, and I want to make sure that through wording we're not excluding these officers who have been very dedicated to us.
That's great.
Very good, thanks. Ready for a motion?
Yes, I would move that we appoint retired police officer Christine Di Natale as a special police officer.
Second that?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're all set, Chief?
I did have one more thing I was hoping to bring up, just,
Sure.
it's not gonna be as fancy as Chief Carrico, but just an update. We successfully hired our final dispatcher, so we are back at full staffing. We have 3 full-time dispatchers currently working, our 4th full-time dispatcher starting on August 10th. And we were able to have an intern with us this year, a fantastic young man who showed a real passion for the job and has since asked to come on as our part-time dispatcher. So we're very excited to return to those staffing numbers. I also interviewed a lovely young man today, a Medfield resident, for the position of police officer. He is debating whether he continues his education or accepts our offer. There are obviously other steps in the process he would have to go to, and on a personal and professional level, I can appreciate the value of continuing your education or beginning a career, and will certainly respect any decision that he makes with that. The last thing is, yesterday I purchased a really exciting piece of equipment for our town. We received a very generous donation from Middlesex Bank a while ago, and they just simply asked that we use the money for something that would really improve safety in the town. So we purchased yesterday a speed tracker. So this is not like anything that you guys have seen with the, the signs that are lit and indicate how fast you're going. This is actually a very discreet device that's about the size of an AED box. We can mount it on any street on a telephone pole, and it will give us multi-directional speeds. So the benefit to us is that we can do this without police presence. So number one, we get a true and accurate recording of what people are doing when they don't think we're there. The second thing is it'll tell us the time. It'll span a 2-week study, tell us the time. It'll tell us whether it's a passenger car, pickup truck, commercial vehicle. Fantastic data-driven information from an enforcement standpoint. When I can take data-driven statistics and use them to allocate my personnel for enforcement, we get a bigger bang for our buck than kind of sitting randomly trying to catch the occasional speeder that might not come through. And the second thing is for people in town, sometimes people have a perception some of our roadways are very narrow and it appears that speed is greater than it is. I'm always happy to send an officer and sit with the radar gun to show them what the actual speeds are. But this is something where, they'll say to us, well, you guys are sitting here, people are slowing down. This isn't, what they do when you're not here. I can actually take citizen complaints and do a 2-week study and then print and send them the report so that they can see exactly what we're seeing from an infraction or violation standpoint. So really looking forward to putting this in place and starting to focus on what is, arguably our top complaint in town, which is traffic.
That's great. Very good. Any other comments, questions?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Sounds like a
All
great
right, thank
purchase,
you. Have a
Chief.
good night.
Thank you.
I hope you feel better.
Yeah, hope you feel better.
Thank you.
All right. Are we deferring on Mo?
We're deferring Mo till our next meeting.
And the,
He's hoping it rains before then, huh?
A little bit.
then I think the next item we have is to open a public hearing regarding the Medfield Community Choice Aggregation Plan, and to give people a chance to review and comment on the changes to that plan. Nick, I don't know if you want to provide an overview of that?
So
or-
Patrick Roach from Good Energy is
Oh,
on the
okay.
call.
Oh,
He's
on.
joining
okay,
now.
he is on. Okay,
So
let's
he'll
get Patrick on. That's
he'll
great.
take us through it.
Okay. Hey, Patrick.
Hello. So I cut out there while I was being promoted to panelist, but I do have a brief presentation I could provide to give an overview of the changes and can get into the hearing. So yeah, if that sounds good, I'll share my screen
I'm sorry,
and get ready.
for permission. I thought Nick was in the process of
Oh, no,
bringing it
sorry.
up for you. I was just watching because he's looking studiously.
Yeah.
Sure. Bring it up. Sorry about that.
All right. Let's see here.
There we go. We got it.
So let's full screen. All right. Okay, there we go. Great. All right. So just as a reminder for everyone, I'm going to be talking about Medfield Community Electricity tonight, which is a municipal aggregation program. And the idea is that in Massachusetts, we have electricity choice. So you can choose where your supply comes from, and the utility, like in Medfield, that's Eversource, they'll always deliver that power and will maintain the wires and poles. But you can choose the supply that comes over your wires. And so through a community choice aggregation program like Medfield Community Electricity, the town will be able to really create a new default electricity supply for customers in Medfield. And customers will still have all the options they have today in terms of choosing their own supplier or staying with the utility. But that's the idea, is really taking local control and creating these new options for supply that don't exist today. So a little bit of background on where we've come from. So last summer town meeting, last year town meeting voted to authorize aggregation. So that's the process of beginning to develop an aggregation plan. The town then selected Good Energy, my company, as the aggregation consultant to work with the town to develop that plan and then ultimately implement it. So there's a community choice aggregation committee that has worked with us, to develop the draft plan, and we released that in December 21 for a little over a month, I think, of public review, and we held a public hearing at the end of January on that. And the process ultimately requires local approval of the plan, as well as consultation with the Department of Energy Resources, and then we submit it to the Department of Public Utilities for their review. So following that public hearing, we submitted the plan to that Department of Energy Resources for their consultation. Unfortunately, that took them quite a while to get around to doing the consultation. So we did not get their consultation letter until June 2022. There were no issues with it. They said the plan was great. They were just, I think, understaffed. So then normally our next step would be to come back to you to vote to approve the plan and send it to the Department of Public Utilities. However, in those intervening 4 months or so, the Department of Public Utilities issued orders on some other aggregation plans. And the way that their orders work, their orders don't just pertain to that individual municipality, they pertain to sort of all aggregations moving forward. So when we looked at that, we recommended that the best thing to do would be to make some updates to the plan and then do another public review period, after which then you could submit it to the Department of Public Utilities. So on July 12th, I believe we started the public review at this Board of Selectmen meeting, and you can download a copy on the program's website. There's also a copy available at the library. So I will review quickly what these updates have been. So the bulk of these were to add, let's say, additional customer communication, so communication to participants in the program. One of those things is there's a quarterly disclosure label that the program has to provide about where the actual sources for its electricity came from. It really doesn't change much quarter to quarter, but you do have to send it out. So we added some additional ways that we would notify the community in terms of having it posted and press releases posted around town. So we added a few more ways to get that label out. And it will always be available on the program website as well. Also, customer communication around price changes. So this was adding a new requirement from DPU to do a direct mail notice when there's a price change. It's something that the plan didn't require. The plan didn't require, but a lot of communities opt to do it anyways. So this just makes it a requirement to do a direct mail notice when there's a price change. And then also there's a new form called a product summary form. The Department of Public Utilities has been trying to help make it easier for consumers to compare between electricity offers. So they created this product summary form that is meant to have, it's one page, it has all of this, every supplier, every electricity supply will have one of these. It's the same information so that customers can very readily compare electricity offers to understand their differences. So we created one of those that would be available on the program website. Most of that information was already going to be provided to customers in the customer notification letter or the opt-out letter, but we just put it in the format that the department wants and have that available. And then also they're looking for more detail about renewable energy content in the opt-out letter and other, if there's a price change notice. Essentially, the state has actually a lot of different types of renewable energy standards, and sometimes suppliers or communities refer to the total amount of renewable energy. Sometimes they refer to just the maybe max class 1 renewable energy percentage. So it can be a little confusing So they've basically asked everybody to have the same kind of information that shows the total as well as how that breaks out into its component sources. So that should be more transparent also to people about the renewable energy content. And then also there's this bullet point about specifying how customers get transitioned when we ultimately launch the program. We'll have an ESA, an electricity supply agreement with a supplier that might last 1, 2, or 3 years. And at the end of that, you would have the option to procure a new supplier, so a new ESA. And the prices would probably change. You might change your renewable content. So now the department wants us to just specify that if you are changing your voluntary renewable energy content so above and beyond the state requirements, if you're changing that between contracts, if people are on an optional product that they opted into, and you're changing the voluntary product, the voluntary amount, they want you to have that person affirmatively kind of opt in again to the choice that's changing. Otherwise, they would go back to the default product of the plan. And that's, again, the default is the one, actually, I'll show you on this next page. The program has a default product. This is what people be enrolled into for automatic enrollment. It's got a little bit more renewable energy than the state standards. It's still meant to be price competitive, although we can't guarantee savings. And then there are optional products for people. There's Medfield Basic, that's still the same, which just meets the state standards for renewable energy. So it would be the lowest cost option in the program. Then there are 2 options to go up to really increase your renewable energy amounts. And so there's this Medfield Mid and Medfield 100. So the Medfield Mid product, that used to be called, in the first version of the plan, it was called Medfield 50. It was 50% and 100%. But when the way the state standards are constantly increasing, the committee decided it would actually be better to have that 50 product be whatever the midpoint is between where the state is and 100%, so that you would sort of, it's always, because that was sort of what the 50% was intended to be, that midpoint. So someone who says, I do want to support a lot more renewable energy, but maybe I can't afford going to 100%. And that will also that will also avoid us having to change the voluntary content from contract to contract, which will mean that often towns do a lot of good work trying to help recruit people to choose those higher renewable options, and that means that there won't be a risk that those people get sent back to the standard product. So that's a slight change to the product offerings, just for that Medfield Mid product. So those are really sort of most of the high level changes. Again, it's a lot of, I think, more communication to customers at different points about either the details of the renewables, or when we're changing price, or those quarterly disclosure labels. And I did just want to, this is just one graph here. We presented the same graph back in January, I think, at the public hearing, or perhaps the December 21 meeting. But this is the DEDM program, which is designed very similar to what Medfield's thinking, where you have in blue, this is the Eversource comparison rate, the residential basic service rate. It changes every 6 months, and it bounces up and down. And then the program's rate that they've contracted for in their various contracts is in green there. And so we've just updated it with sort of what's happened since we were last presenting here. So as many of you may know, the energy markets have been on a tear. So right now, the program, their contract goes through the end of 2024, I believe. So they're at 10.7 cents, for the next, sorry, I think to the end of 2023. So they're at 10.7 cents for the next year plus. Meanwhile, this 6-month period, Eversource's basic service rate is up over 17 cents. So they're saving considerable money right now, and they have over the course of the program since they launched in 2016. And also participation has remained really high. They had around 8,000 participants at launch, and they're at 7,800 participants now. So they've maintained that participation. So I think it's a good example of what you might expect given the kind of plan that Medfield has in front of it. Again, there's a disclaimer there that we can't guarantee savings. So finally, moving forward, we've had the public review closing, I believe, August 22nd. So people are encouraged to go to the website, pick up a copy of the plan to the library. You can submit comment on the website or in writing. There's directions there for how to do that. And we'll reconvene with the CCA committee after that to consider all the comments, possibly adjust the plan further. And then we'd like to do is come back to the board, present those, the sort of summary of those comments and sort of what the final plan is for your potential vote, possibly as soon as the August 29th meeting. We'll see. And then if you approve it, then we would submit it on to the Department of Public Utilities. So yeah, so that is that. And happy to take any questions before or after the public hearing.
Thanks, Patrick. Eileen, questions?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Me too. And I'm good. Having been involved with this all along, I think the public hearing is open now, and I think we keep it open until we come back together and close it on the 29th. That's just want to make sure I got the etiquette right, Mark.
Are they supposed to keep the public hearing open? Or can they close it tonight?
Is that the question directed at me?
Yeah. I think that's how we
Okay,
talked about
yeah.
doing it, Patrick, right? We were going to leave it open.
I guess you could. I think often, I don't know that you have to, because the public comment period and the public hearing are two different things. So I think you could have the public hearing tonight and close that. The public comment period is still going, so we're still accepting public comment through all those other means.
Okay.
So
Okay, well,
I think that might be the
I'll go with simplicity in a heartbeat, but we have two people in the audience, at least one of which raised his hand. So the public hearing is open. Bill?
Yep, hi, Bill Massaro, Evergreen Way. Patrick, thank you for your responses.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. I just have a question. What you presented tonight, particularly the graph and everything else, is that available on your website, on the town's MEC's website?
We can post it there. Yeah, I'll post it there probably tomorrow. Yep.
Okay, great. That's it. That's the only question I had.
Great. Other questions? If there are no more, hold on. Let's make sure.
No, I didn't see any raised hands.
Q&A. No open questions from outside. So I will then go ahead and declare this public hearing is closed. The public comment period, based on what Patrick presented, goes until August 22nd. As a practical matter, we won't be taking this up until we have our second meeting in August. So that last Tuesday in August, which I guess was the 29th, our 30th. Okay, I thought there was something wrong with that number. It just didn't ring a bell, and I was thinking, is it the 28th? Or so on the 30th, which is the final Tuesday in August, that's when we have our second August meeting scheduled for. And presumably, that would be the meeting that we'll be asked to approve the plan, taking into account any public comments that have come in between now and August 22nd.
Okay,
Okay? Very good. Thank you, Patrick.
thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. All right. Our next item is David Cashman from SEB Housing submitting a request for approval of some revised rent calculations for the Aura at Medfield.
He's joining now.
He's on.
See him? There you are. We see you, David. We don't hear you yet. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yes, good evening, Board. Yes, so I recognize some of you, and you may recognize me from other Medfield properties that we work with that have affordable units. And as you know, in the affordable program, every year HUD publishes updated income limits. Typically they go up. In recent years, they've gone up a lot. And the affordable rents are tied to those income limits. We were brought on board a little bit later with this property, Medfield Aura. However, we're still in a pre-marketing, pre-lottery, pre-lease-up phase with the affordable units. At present, the regulatory agreement, which has the rents as an appendix, the rents are tied to 2020 figures, and they are used, looks like they used a slightly incorrect methodology to calculate them. They used the mass housing methodology as opposed to DHCD, so they're a little bit off. But in any event, I'm just here before the board asking if we can get approval of 2021 rents. Those are still lower than the income limits that applying households will be able to have and qualify, which are tied to the 2022 numbers. The reason for that is because there's currently a moratorium on the approval of 2022 rents with DHCD, so I'm not bothering to even ask for that because I think it would be a waste of everyone's time. I'm simply asking if the board will approve the 2021 rents so that we can get marketing started and hopefully help this property get their affordable units leased up.
Any questions?
No, I think we caught up early this afternoon, Christine, so I think I'm comfortable and I understand why we're doing what we're doing and the approach that's being taken.
Okay. Any questions? Pete?
I don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, so maybe someone can explain it to me. I'm looking at a document that has the rents from before and the rents that are slightly higher now. And can you just maybe explain what's going on, the changes?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, oftentimes when these deals are getting permitted, they're doing so kind of well in advance of when marketing starts. In this particular case, I think that the rents had been calculated when the income limits that were available were the 2020 ones. The regulatory agreement was signed in January of 2021, which means that the only income limits that were then available were the ones that had been published in April of 2020. And so that's what was used. Now, obviously, time has gone by, and now we're getting ready to start the marketing campaign. We're a full year plus out from when the regulatory agreement was signed. Income limits have gone up by hundreds of dollars, which means that households will be able to make hundreds of dollars more now to qualify than sort of what was contemplated at the time the agreement was signed. And we're just asking, the regulatory agreements specifically contemplate that income limits can go up in the interim between when they're signed and when a marketing campaign starts. And so we're just asking to sort of invoke that provision and get rents that are not actually tied to the 2022 numbers, but are closer to them. This is a very
David,
common
for instance,
practice. It's
ask about
again
the specific
specifically
units?
contemplated by the regulatory agreements. Rent updates are usually a yearly request that we make for all the properties that we work with.
David, can I ask you about the specific units? For instance, I'm looking at something that is the old, I think it's a letter from DHCD maybe, or an agreement, and the one bedroom was at 1804, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then now you're asking for, I see a number of different rates here. Which is the one that you're asking for?
It's
So the apples to apples comparison is 2021. Now, the thing that's a little bit different is that when the regulatory agreement was signed, it was not contemplated that tenants would be paying their own utilities. That arrangement has since changed. So the apples to apples comparison is for a one bedroom. The agreement says 1804. The number that we'd actually be asking for is 2021, but after you account for the utilities that tenants will pay, it would be 1908.
All right, so it's basically going from 1804 to 1908 is what you're saying.
Well, but the
Right.
tenants are paying their own utilities,
They weren't paying their utilities,
at least the way it was set up.
That's right.
So in Appendix A, the numbers there, it sounds like they used a different methodology based on what you said, David, but aside from that, Appendix A in the original agreement showed no utility allowance, which made it look like the landlord would cover the utilities. This new revised set has that utility allowance pulled out of the newer rental rates, and that's how you're getting to the net rent, with the assumption that now tenants will pay for their own utilities.
Exactly.
Okay. Make sense?
so who, in the original one, who's paying the utilities? The tenants were paying?
The landlord.
The
So
landlord.
the original one, see the zero utility allowance in that
Oh,
right-hand
yeah,
column?
yeah,
That
okay.
was, that was structured as if the landlord was covering the utilities. So I don't know if
So it's
it's,
basically a $105 increase is what you're looking for a one-bedroom, is that right?
I think the better way to think about it, Pete, for what you're doing, is to say the one-bedroom rent was 1804. The comparable number now is 2021. But the actual rent would be 1908 because now the tenants will pay their own utilities and they're being given an allowance of 113 as the estimate of what those utility costs will be.
So the tenant's rent's gone up $215 or something, you're saying,
Assuming the
$217.
utility, assuming their utility costs are that. I get that right, David?
Yeah, you sure did.
And part of the issue is, not to make that sound as bad as it does, but the original agreement was using 2020 numbers for what was the allowable income. Now we're using 2021 numbers, still not using 2022 numbers, but it's also a reflection of the fact that the time this estimate was made, it's at least a year later, and the standards for affordability have gone up.
Yes, the incomes have gone way up to qualify. As between 2020 and 2022, I think it's gone up probably close to $20,000 or something like that, 18,000.
Okay.
And then it looks like it's a $100 increase for a two-bedroom unit and then a much smaller increase for a three-bedroom. Three-bedroom looks like it goes up maybe $25 or something.
Yeah, right. That's very small.
All right, that's all my questions, thank you.
And given that you just confirmed everything I just threw out there, David, I do in fact think I understand.
You said it quite well.
David, to clarify, you've already reviewed this with DHCD and you have their approval, pending our approval?
Yeah, that's right. They just want to make sure the town's okay because that's the process that's laid out in the agreement.
For what it's worth, when I read that, the DHCD was on board with this. As long as I understood all the numbers, which you just confirmed I do, then I'm fine with that. Got it.
Okay.
David, when do you anticipate move-in dates after the lottery?
The lottery process takes 2.5 months, and then typically once the lottery's been run, developers can get people into units. Probably if everything goes well within a month or 6 weeks, and then it'll phase in. It won't be everyone right at once, but maybe the first folks would be able to move in 4 to 6 weeks after the lottery.
Thank you.
And if I read it correctly, there's no favoritism to Medfield residents. This is strictly.
There's a local preference.
There was 3 people. Is there preference to Medfield residents? Yes, no?
Yes, there's a local preference.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
On the first round of the lottery. Yes. On the first round.
What happens in the second round?
When when somebody decides in a year or 2 years that they no longer want to rent the property, then it's open for a lottery. It wouldn't go back to a local preference.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha,
So just the initial.
gotcha.
Okay. We have a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. You got it, David.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
All
Thank you.
right. Next item on the agenda, discussion and evaluation of town administrators FY22 goals. And I think this is the beginning of a discussion as opposed to the completion of a discussion, but,
Right, and so something that I posed to Christine, so I just got a sheet from Rich yesterday or so to get everything
Jamie,
filled out.
yep.
From Jamie, from Rich. And there's a few more meetings I want to have before I complete my submission. But something I'd like to make a recommendation or suggestion is, you've been on the board now for, this is your second term. Pete, you've been on for multiple terms. In looking at this and wanting to take this seriously, I'd like to put a request, is there a possibility for us, after our August 30th meeting, to have a meeting 100% set aside that the three of us, certainly the public is welcome, to talk about Christine's goals and then our goals and review the strategic goals of the town. To take a step back, since some of them were placed over the last 5 to 10 years. It's new to me, and I'd love to know the thought process that's gone in and put thought into where we're going over the next 5 years. Instead of trying to do it in a meeting like this, to literally come in and say, that's what the intent of our hour or two may be.
I think we're actually going to have part of that discussion tonight, unless we're not, but I'm kind of neutral either way, whether we have to have a standalone meeting to do that, or whether we just pick it back up you're basically saying have a special meeting, so we would schedule an extra Board of Selectmen meeting, the only purpose of which would be to talk about Christine's goals for FY23, our priorities for, if you look at the document that we have on the town website, there's town goals, and then in the right-hand column is kind of where we, as selectmen, discussed what specifically were we trying to get done in the short run. So the town goals and selectmen goals are kind of all in the same document, just if you didn't recognize that. So I don't have any problem with having just a separate meeting on that.
I think that's a good idea.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
I would suggest, if you're ready, that we have a start to that
Sure.
discussion tonight, to the extent that you've done anything, because I've at least got some preliminary
Sure.
thoughts that I'll share, but that's all in the spirit of stirring the pot, not
Yeah.
necessarily going final.
No, I appreciate that. That'd be
Okay.
great.
Okay. That's good. So the process on the FY22 goals, Christine, you have provided, I think, all three of us with your perspective on the accomplishment of the goals that you had for FY22 that we all have as a reference point. The Excel spreadsheet that the three of us should be using to evaluate accomplishment. Jamie has sent those out to us individually. We need to return those separately to Jamie. Jamie will then compile those results into a consolidated response from the three of us in a spreadsheet that we then will review on the 30th of August. And that is public record, that's public discussion. And that constitutes largely the actual performance evaluation in terms of a public discussion of that. The only thing that I think, Christine, you either have or you will, or when you establish goals for someone at the beginning of a fiscal year, you have no idea what real life is going to be like over the course of that fiscal year. It seems to me it would be appropriate for us to be open, at least, to recognizing things that came up over the course of the year that were not anticipated, that we think should go into that public evaluation.
100%.
So, I would just suggest that relative to the structured format of that spreadsheet that's tied to the list of original goals, we ought to be prepared to put some English on that ball if there's things that came up over the course of the year that we weren't smart enough to build into the original list that we think should be taken into account.
Right, and I would think that I can have a one-on-one conversation with Jamie. So if in submitting my spreadsheet, I want to make sure that I am able to articulate that exact concern, that the spreadsheet's somewhat cut, like, there's not a lot of wiggle room per se, but I'd like to be able to make sure, when I go back to my corporate days of doing a review, yes, you could do it in that manner, but you could also write a dialogue that, or include some input that gives a little more insight on the individual and the accomplishments instead of just cut and dry with numbers.
And if we do that individually,
Yes.
which we would have to do between now and the 30th, I would expect Jamie's consolidation would be the numerical consolidation on the spreadsheet and a compilation
Yes.
of our respective comments that would become part of the public record.
Yes.
Works for me. Does that work for you, Pete?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
All right.
for
Anything
you?
else on
Works for me.
22? We got the course of action here. Next item down, discussion of town administrators FY '23 goals and a vote to approve the town administrator's '23 goals. But in light of this discussion, I don't think we're going to do the second part because it sounds like we'll have a more comprehensive discussion somewhere from the 30th of August or shortly thereafter. I have some comments. If you've all looked at Christine's
Yep.
goals, I have, and I'm happy to share some general reactions, but I'll, again, start with you, Eileen, if there's anything that is appropriate to put out on the table now.
So I do, in the first one, develop strategies to increase public participation and then ensure that citizens have the opportunity to be actively engaged in planning and implementing of services. When you say participate, is it more like in committees? Is it more in, like, is it
I think
the
we're
broader-
looking at more in education. You know, one of the things we've had some feedback over the past year is that people really don't understand our form of government.
Okay.
We have a lot of people who have moved to town who are not familiar with town meeting or are just not familiar with how it works. A lot of people think of town meeting as just a regular meeting, and they don't differentiate between a Board of Selectmen's meeting and the town meeting. So I think it's an education to try and increase participation within our town meeting. I think that's really what my focus has been.
Okay.
Given some of the feedback we had both at the state hospital special town meeting and the school special town meeting as to what really is town meeting. And then obviously not having enough people show up at our
Couldn't agree
annual
more.
town meeting has really brought that to the forefront for Scott and I in working on something to address that.
And couldn't agree more. And actually, we've talked about that offline, so now I have a better understanding. And then just kind of a simple comment, but so I noticed this year your goals included bringing in the police, fire, DPW every quarter. Even though it may not be a goal, is that something kind of you set as a goal? Is that's what we're going to do every year going
Just
forward?
continuing.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
I figured
perfect.
we met it last year. It was a good practice. Obviously, you heard from Carrico, and the chief kind of gave you a little brief on her goals, although she doesn't realize she was scheduled for August 30th, so you'll see her again. Yeah, I think once we do something like that, we continue to do that.
Okay, and that, because I love the idea too of one of your goals this year that we saw on the website improvements is, again, just that ongoing, when citizens come out and say, hey, could you put the following on the website? If it makes it easier for, Education 101, I want to run an event, where do I go? Who do I have to see? Do I need the Board of Health? Do I need the those type of things, if we can continue to do that, that's great.
Yep. For example, we had a call this week from somebody who wanted to know how to participate under citizens' comment at a Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Sure.
And while it's in your policy how to do that, it's not clear unless you actually knew that it was a policy. So, when we get those kind of things, we try to update them on the fly so that people we don't get that question a second time.
Sure.
Pete?
I don't have any issues at the moment.
So these are all preliminary comments. And as I went through your list, some of this is philosophical, I guess. From a pure monetary standpoint, the accomplishment of these goals is what we'll use to figure out what portion of the bonus that you're eligible for gets awarded. And the way I look at that is the kinds of goals we're talking about here should be goals focused on making improvements, changes, as opposed to ongoing things. So just as a point, if the quarterly updates from the DPW, police, and fire is a good idea, that's great. We should incorporate that into how we do business. But at that point that we do that, having that become an ongoing goal, it's kind of like, well, but that's how we operate, so it's not, it's not, if we were trying to figure out how to improve, and we implemented that in the first year, then it counts, but after it's working, then I think it comes off. I went through your draft, Christine, and the thing I was looking for was some of, my bias was toward crisp goals that have clear endpoint objectives. And I understand not all of them do, but I was sensitive to it because in this year's goals, in your self-assessment, there were a number of things that are continuing or started, which is for absolutely good reasons, but you wouldn't want a second year of, well, we're just continuing to do it. It's like, well, let's put an endpoint in here. So I went through it. I circled a few things. First goal in that first grouping, finalizing the committee. The word finalized, that's a good word. That doesn't mean it never changes, but that means we have it. I think the idea of this town meeting 101 session is a good one, and it's probably, maybe not this first time, it's not necessarily more than one session, but I kind of think it was like what I had tried to do in the very first couple of years, only to help people understand going into the town meeting what the budget was all about.
Right.
I see this potentially as being broader than that, and because of that, it's not necessarily just the month before the annual town meeting that we're doing it. It could be depending on the topic. I think it's a great idea. So I really like that one. The second two, the town administrator monthly office hours, I just said, who are these for? Whose is it for? And are they needed? And the reason I asked, are they needed, is it strikes me that you're pretty much readily available to anybody who wants to waltz in here. So I was sitting there saying, if this is, a thing for us to do, who is it that is there somebody, I was kind of really questioning whether we needed to make that an explicit goal, is what it really was.
So I like it as a goal because I think, I have an open door policy. Many of you have been in recently and haven't been able to see me because I've been talking to residents. So I think one of the things that this came out of was that I happened to run into somebody in the town clerk's office who was doing business with the town clerk who I had never met before and had a couple of comments and concerns. And didn't know they could just pop in at any time. So never really thought to do that. And then I spend all day at the elections trying to interact with people and, if they see me, they have a question and they bring it up. So I thought building on that, it would be nice if we did one, not only at the businesses in town to get some exposure and to talk to our business owners, but for those people who just happen to be grabbing a muffin to say, oh, I've been meaning to talk to you about this, but I don't really want to make that trip down to the town hall. So I think that was more kind of a personal goal that I was trying to put forward.
Okay, well, the only reason I was wondering about it is it's like, well, people just walk in anytime they want. But fine, if you want to do that, that's great. The next one down, the monthly written town administrator reports. My questions there are, who are these for? What's the format? And how long are you expected to take to write these things? Because I know I'm not looking for more things to read. I don't feel like I'm out of touch on that. So I'm concerned if we start building in goals that throw administrative tasks at you to write things. I really want to know, who is it going to? Who needs it? Is this a 20-page report? Is it a half-page report?
I was envisioning it as a once a month, probably to get started, maybe once a quarter, but I was figuring a once a month. There's a lot of information in this building, especially what my other department heads and what the team is doing that does not get out to you or gets out to you in passing, that it would be nice to have, for you to have in a written format and then to be able to refer to it.
If you did a template, so the only reason I can even comment on what I'm about to say is I forget what document I was looking at this morning that I think you had shared. Maybe it's the 2023 draft that you sent out in April. I think it's 164 pages.
Yes.
And at first I was like, whoa, 160, what is in here? But then I went through each department and I was like, oh, it's interesting. So if you even basically did a template that I totally agree. I hated doing weekly reports as a sales rep because you ended up taking like all Friday afternoon because you don't want to just write something and throw it out there. You're putting some thought behind it. So how do we make it so that you are sharing information? And I would actually think it's great for the citizens if they want to see what's going on in each department. But to try to keep it so it's simple, it's straightforward, and it's not tasking you with having to write a lot, but just little nuggets of, like I would say, like Mo, like, North Street, what he just did, like that, there's updates as to what's going on, what we're accomplishing, but again, not crazy detail. And if the citizen
No,
wants to
I
ask you
think-
that, great, but.
I think a very short update, and a lot of that information will come from the monthly department head meetings we have, just to give you an update on what's going on in the other
You
ones.
could even
But-
put it on them, like, I hate to say it, but if you're deliverable to us, if you say, listen, this is
Right.
my deliverable, I don't want to put words in your mouth, can you give me a summary? And I will then be sharing that, so.
Next group down, identify and advance opportunities for cooperation. I think that's a great goal between town departments and actually the whole thing, the scope that you put in here, I thought was a great goal. Looking again for the objective metrics of accomplishment, I circled improved services and reduced costs. Those are the two metrics that, for me, went with that. So I like that because it was clear. The sub-goals, investigate the opportunity for a human services department. The only question I had there was for this year, what's the output? What form? I understand why this quite likely is a year of investigating that as opposed to we're going to move ahead. But it would be worth thinking about what form the output might take as opposed to, we had some meetings, we talked about it, and we're going to investigate it further. So just something to think about on that.
I'll think about that, but I'll be planning on bringing a recommendation to you
Okay.
for that department.
Okay. And your B, I checked off and said, good, identify responsibility for grounds and open space parcels, and prepare a maintenance plan for all identified locations. But that's one of my hot buttons, is that we start taking care of the land that we have before we start acquiring more land that we think we want. And the only question I had on that, it said for all identified locations, and I was just, in reading that, it's like, so is that a subset of all the locations that we have? Or is it that we might have open space that we don't know about, that we haven't identified yet? And I'm okay, either way we want to go. It may be that we have to figure out what's going on with the big piece of the property before we worry about things like that walkway that's next to my yard that gets cut twice in the summer, once in June and once like late in September. And then I just fight weeds the whole rest of the time and nobody can walk on it because it's so overgrown. But that's a small thing compared to who's going to be mowing, the Baxter Park.
Right, and we've talked about this at length for many years about the building and grounds department. I think what we really need to do is look at a financial analysis of whether or not we should be using an outside contractor for that, or if it makes sense for us. And I do think we need to start with the big parcels, and part of that is the public safety building, the library, and the town hall. We recently brought a company in just to do some weeding and some minor mulching, and received some very positive feedback, not only from the people who are visiting the town hall, but the people who work in the town hall. So it's really clear to me that those are the big pieces we need to look at first.
Next one down, the goal, continue to manage town finances. This is one, and this is a broad statement, because it's not just about your goals, but it's also about ours. I actually think that we collectively have done a lot of good things to put the town on a firmer financial footing. So when I looked at some of this stuff, it was like, well, we've done a lot of good things, so what would we be worried about now? The things that you called out here, the ARPA budget, the GFOA budget, the capital plan. The question I had on the capital plan presented to BOS prior to December 1st, is that both the capital equipment and the major construction project? So that both capital budgets, or are we more focused on?
We're more focused on the capital equipment budget,
Okay.
and that's timed up with the financial policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's fine, it was a question. And then I added one, and this one's gonna require some thought, and you might not even like the idea, but it's one of those things that I've been trying to figure out how to do. Could we get a set of what I will call taxpayer burden metrics, and a multi-year picture of cost growth areas in the town budget? What I'm getting at is not micro growth, but if we thought about how to characterize the town budget, one part of it's going to be the debt side, one part of it's going to be the benefit side, one part of it's going to be the school operating budget side, and other parts the town operating budget side. So I'm looking at those sort of macro pictures. and saying it would be kind of nice to know how those things have changed over a 10 to 20 year period, because it gives you a sense of what segments of the town budget are actually getting bigger. You know, we've gone through several years where the debt is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So that part of the balloon, the air's been going out of, but another part of the balloon, the air has been going into. And I'm sensitive to the fact that we're gonna go into a cycle pretty soon, I think, where that debt side is gonna start getting pumped back up again. And I'm worried if we don't have a handle on what grew how fast for how long, when we start getting new pressure points, we need a perspective on that.
Okay.
The taxpayer burden metric, I'll tell you exactly what I would like to get. And it's mostly around schools, but it's not just the school part. We've had a lot of it's my issue with the state's lack of support for Medfield with Chapter 70 funding is what really has got me going. And I've heard the arguments about how affluent a town we are, but I seriously question if you were to adjust that for our non-diversified tax base and said, forget how affluent the town is, let's take a look at the burden that the individual homeowner is covering for schools compared to some other towns that have a more diversified tax base. I don't think you would see that. I think you would see that there is a surprisingly high burden already placed on taxpayers here. So I'm looking for ways to push back on the legislature around this attitude that says we really don't need to send Chapter 70 funding to towns like Medfield because they're so rich. Because I think some of the people, the legislators that are doing that, are from affluent towns where their taxpayers aren't paying anywhere near what we are. But I don't know that for sure. That's the thing I really want to get. That's it for that. You had one, continue to work with and support the new elementary school project committee. Obviously, the project is important, but I just said, well, that for me was sort of a given. So that wasn't really a goal that needed to be here. It's like, yeah, we're all going to try to help row the boat where somebody lets us on the boat and gives us an oar. But I looked at that and said, what's the metric? You know, if that really belongs here, what's the metric? I don't think it belongs on the list.
It may not belong on the list. I think it was drawing attention to the fact that we didn't discuss it last year and took up a significant amount of bandwidth last year for all of the staff.
Yep.
So I think when I read that, you know what your staff took on for the state hospital, and you know what your staff took on for everything we just did for the school vote and all of that. So I think there's a way to reshape that, but to put, to your point, like real measurables, because you know exactly what you did. And if you could write last year's goals over again and put that in.
Yeah, if there's something, again, like I'm looking at these goals not as continuation of the work we do. I'm looking at these goals as things that are driving change in how we do business. So if there's something that you look at from last year that says, well, no, I know exactly what I wish we had been doing last year and I want to do it this year when this project gets underway, that's fine. I just looked at it the way it was worded and it's like, well, we all want to see the project get through. So I didn't know what that meant. Then the last one, provide support for implementing economic development initiatives and promote local businesses. The one thing you had was a written Board of Selectmen policy for liquor licenses. And I said, why do we need this? And then my question was, is this one focused on the one-day licenses or liquor licenses for businesses?
I think it's both. I think we have a lot of people who come into the town hall don't understand when they're opening up a new business how they would apply for a liquor license. We don't have any written procedures on that. A lot of that is dictated by the state, but it would be nice for us to be able to offer that to people who come in and ask, but also in the one-day licenses as well, just to set out a policy for it.
So is there a problem we're looking to solve, or is it just a matter of making sure the information is out there?
Just
It's an
information,
education.
just more education and more formalizing. I think one of the continuing goals that's not on there is to continue to formalize and write up our policies and procedures as we find them.
Do we ever look at, when we look at Medfield, people chuckle when like another pizza joint opens or another nail salon opens, like, oh, but do we look at and say, you know, this is something that we're lacking and we try to recruit certain companies to Medfield? Like good, like it or, What's that?
Like a Mexican restaurant?
Like Chipotle. No, I mean, but
Like
like,
Starbucks? Like Roche Brothers? I don't know what you're talking about.
but it's okay. So those are good things, right? Whether people may not like exactly where they're located and whatever, we know that those are successful businesses that will draw people in.
Yeah.
We're seeing like when you see what the baseball group did for Little League, I would like to think a lot of restaurants
Yeah.
and shops benefited from having Braintree, Westfield, Cohasset, et cetera, come into Medfield, and maybe for the first time they've been in Medfield.
Right. It's all those economic multipliers that are helpful to everybody in town.
So so on that one there, I wasn't sure why the liquor license made it to the top of the list, and it was the only thing there, but I put a note. I said, it seems to me that a goal in this area should focus on balancing commercial attractiveness improving the commercial attractiveness of the downtown with the initiatives that we have to expand public access to the downtown. So as I was looking at it, we've been doing reasonably well on the economic development front for the last couple of years. I think we're upgraded, but I think we want to keep going with that. On the other hand, then you have this other thing, Complete Streets, that's coming in, trying to make it easier for people in town to take advantage, especially of the downtown. Mm-hmm. And then we also have this other thread of infrastructure improvements in terms of trying to figure out, like we've got North Street taken care of for the time being, but not everybody was happy that we didn't do a more extensive thing there. And the thing that worries me is that you have the things like Complete Streets, which are designed to make roads which are already pretty heavily burdened, more broadly available to a broader group of users who, in order to make it easier for them to get downtown. We're kind of drawing everything into the center of town, and on one hand, we want people to, we want more economic development. On the other hand, we want more people to come in, but I'm worried that this whole thing converges at the North Street, Main Street intersection in a bunch of conflicting goals that are going to create some serious problems and potentially some serious safety problems if we don't figure out how to do this in a thoughtful way. So I'm not being very precise here, but I'm saying if I were going to think about what kind of goal we would have in this area of economic development, it would be a goal to try to get out in front of these converging forces that, if we figure out how to do it the right way, is going to result in a really great, fun place to go that's economically vibrant, that people can get through without hitting people or other things. But I don't think that's going to be an easy problem to solve. And if we can figure out a way to get out in front of that one sooner rather than later, that just seemed like a good idea to make. So that's my feedback on the draft goals that you had. Okay. Anything else on that
No,
one?
I mean, I appreciate that dialogue. That was good.
Okay. The next item we had was the discussion of the Board of Selectmen's FY 2023 goals. And I think that folds into the town goals. So do we want to talk about this one tonight? I'm ready to comment on some of this, but it sounds like we might be better off having the real in-depth discussion when we have that meeting that you just asked for.
Yeah, only because like if you look at some of the other items we still need to talk about
Yeah.
tonight, I feel like we're gonna dilute,
Mhm.
something's gonna get diluted here.
Yeah,
When I
okay.
think we could have a meeting completely dedicated to this.
So for your benefit,
Yeah.
I went through this and looked, now this is 2018-19 goals. We've
Yes.
never actually done anything with this. I went through, crossed out some things that either have been, the ones that had been done, I generally put a check and said we're done. The ones that were overcome by events or really maybe don't make as much sense now as it sounded like they would in 2018.
Okay.
I crossed out. So my suggestion for you, given you're saying, gee, I don't know where you guys all came from,
Yeah.
my suggestion for you would be to pull this off the Selectmen's town goals.
Yes,
Recognize this stuff is sort of out of date.
yes.
My personal opinion is that the write-ups at the top level are still kind of capture the right philosophy. The stuff that's down below, a lot of it's already been done, and some of it maybe isn't quite, I've got a bunch of specific ideas, and I won't drag us through that again, but some of it, we may have some new things because we've evolved for 4 years.
Okay,
So,
good,
okay.
good, very good.
Does that make sense to you, Pete?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, next, discussion of maintenance and care of the chapel and infirmary leased by the Cultural Alliance. Oh,
So this,
Chris,
sorry. Can I just ask a question on the selectmen goals?
Yeah.
And this sort of dedicated meeting that would be on it. How do you foresee, or do you foresee any kind of opportunity for thoughtful public participation in that and have it be, really part of the discussion for that night?
It's an open meeting. Yeah, I would welcome
Yeah.
if people have opinions, absolutely.
Because I think it would be great. I mean, we elect you to office. You guys do a great job. Christine does a great job. I think that it would be wonderful as part of Christine's goals, what you articulated tonight, is to have that particular meeting really be out there as saying, we invite the public to come and
I think that's
and
right.
actively
That's why I didn't wanna
participate.
do the-
Yeah.
I'd rather do it a dedicated,
Yeah.
it's not all this other
Yeah.
stuff in the meeting, it's let's talk about,
Yeah.
because we're all rotating through, and this is.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
that
just-
that argues even more for that kind of a dedicated meeting.
Yeah.
We probably would do it, it probably would make sense to do it in September as opposed to August when
People back in
people
town.
aren't here. Plus, if we have our second meeting scheduled for the 30th, so it would be easier to look at that. As far as I'm concerned, it would be better to look at that sooner rather than later in September.
Yeah. And I've got
Yeah,
Bill,
I
Bill,
like that.
Bill-
You can put that in the Medfield Insider.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We just need a date.
We just don't have a date yet. That's going
Right,
to take a little
yeah.
work.
But still, I would put it out and let people start thinking about it.
Exactly. And I think that Bill just commented to the side about having a packet of information that people could look at. So having draft goals or, as an aside, I was sitting here at one meeting, Gus, when I think you had referenced the town goals. And I remember sitting there making a note to myself saying, where are those town goals? I've never seen them. I don't think people know that they exist. So this is a good opportunity to kind of get everybody at a baseline level and get them off the ground.
That was, just as a background, that was when I became a selectman the very first time. That it was the very first initiative I personally pushed. And the point wasn't to create the Magna Carta. The point was to actually, and incidentally, when my draft, and we refined it, but the draft I started with was not my opinion. It was my assimilation of everything I thought I had heard for 15 years about what the town said about itself. That's how I wrote that when it was drafted. And the whole point was, if we can articulate as a town what our main, you don't want a 50-page document, but if you can articulate as a town what the main focal points are, and you can capture both the aesthetic piece of it, which is what those little paragraphs were, but then drive it down into the practical things. The whole point was just put there and say, here's what we think we're doing, and the whole point was so that anybody could look at it and say, I think you got that one wrong. I understand why you thought it made sense 2 years ago. It doesn't make sense anymore. Don't do that one, and you left this thing out over here, and that was the whole point of it. So.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. I just didn't know it existed until you had mentioned it, and I had to go back and look at it and be like, oh, we need to publicize this. People need to know it's there.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
Okay. Good, okay. Let's see, so the next thing, discussion of maintenance and care of the chapel and infirmary leased by the Cultural Alliance of Medfield.
So I just want to give you an update on this. As you know, the town is responsible for maintenance of the chapel until construction begins. We have had a few minor issues with the roof that we've addressed on a kind of an emergency safety basis. We had John Thompson solicit some quotes for what work we needed to have done at the roof, and then in consultation with Amy Colleran, our facilities director, and Gary Pelletier, our building inspector, we've decided that we are going to actually hire an engineering company to come in and give us a scope of work for the roof. I don't want to get into awarding somebody to fix what we think is wrong with the roof and then getting up there and finding out that there are more issues than we knew about, and break those down into what our short-term or long-term issues in fixing the roof are. I did have a chance, I know Jean's on here, but I did have a chance to meet with Jean to explain that process to her, and that we'll try to get into that as soon as possible and get somebody up there to look at it.
Good.
I did, DCAM let me know a couple weeks ago they were going to do a drone flight over the overlook area and the laundry parcel, and they actually agreed to do some photos for us of the chapel at the roof, which will be helpful to to the consultant looking at it as well. So I just wanted to give you an update. I know people have been talking to you about the roof, and we are handling it. It's just going a little slower than we anticipated.
Christine, philosophically, the town, in us thinking about what we, are doing, we still have a maintenance responsibility there. The town, and I think this might even bleed over in the short run to the rest of the buildings, because Trinity hasn't bought them from us yet. Our goal as a town, from the standpoint of the maintenance of the buildings in the coming year, or year plus, is to do the things we need to do to make sure that we're doing what we can reasonably do to arrest any further deterioration of buildings, so that when the people who really want them are in the position to really do something with them, they're not dealing with a worse problem than they thought they were walking into. We're not in the business of restoring for the time, we're not going to do fancy restorations. We're going to do the practical things that arrest any deterioration, address any, glaring deficiencies. We'll do that in the most cost-effective manner, but with the goal of trying to protect that property until, whether it's CAM in the case of the chapel and the infirmary, or it's Trinity in the case of everything else, at the point that they take it over, it's their job to do the true work that they have in mind to turn these buildings into what they
And
want
that's why we're looking at it both from a short-term and a long-term view. What are the costs and the scope of work to make the building watertight to get them to the next step? Because obviously we don't want to also interfere with any of the construction or plans that they have as well.
And I might also comment, and we clearly will take on responsibility for any safety-related things like pieces of slate roof and gutters at
Those
the
have been
top of the
fixed.
church steeple
Yes.
and our chapel steeple and things like that, whether that's got nothing to do with preserving the building, it's just making
No,
sure
those
things
are
stay
just-
safe. Okay. Bill?
Yeah, it's my understanding that some work's already going on up there on the roofs that Trinity is undertaking, and I've been told that one of the biggest problems that's been, both with the chapel and some of the other buildings, has been that the metal junkies who stole all of the downspouts and everything else, you wound up with all of the rainwater coming down along the foundations, getting into the basements, and starting to deteriorate both the stonework and whatever else is in the basements, everything else. I'm told that Trinity's investigating putting downspouts on as well. So some of that work's being done. The other thing to keep in mind is whatever you do spend, while you don't get a significant amount of money back, they are allowable costs against the sale of the property too. So that somewhat helps a little bit.
Right. Good. Okay.
Good.
Pete, any?
Nothing on that. no.
Nothing on that. Okay. Next, discuss the number of members of the Board of Selectmen. Eileen, I think you're the one that wanted this on the agenda, so
Yes, well,
take it away.
it's just one of the things that when I first got on the board and I looked around other communities, and matter of fact, when I met with Denise Garlick, she mentioned that Needham had gone from 3 to 5. It went really well. I was talking with Nick today, and I know, ironically, Milton has recently gone 3 to 5, and I believe the person that had recommended it is saying, in some ways I wish I never even recommended it. So I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. I think if you said, Eileen, you have to sit over there and support it for the next 10 minutes and then go over here and be against it for the next 10 minutes, I could. I mean, there's I think as the town is growing, could 5 bring more to the discussion? Absolutely. But on the flip side, having 3 it keeps it very transparent for the town. There are no back meetings, and I don't say that in any derogatory way. If you have a committee of 5, you have the right to have 2 meet here, 2 meet there, and you're not breaking any rules. But a lot of times the discussions aren't had in front of the citizens. And I think in the role that we're in, and I've thought about this a lot, the role that we're in, we need to be as transparent as humanly possible. When you read about all the other towns having issues with their government, the one thing I don't want to do coming into this is bring any chance that we would not be as transparent and candid and open in front of our citizens. But I'm curious as to where you're at and if you've thought of it over the years, or if it's not something that you even want to table, or...
I've always had sort of a general sense that 5 would be better, but that it's a complicated process to get there. So I've never been that committed, I guess, in my mind to it being that much better. So that I've never pushed to have it happen. But, you know, if we were starting over and we were picking, I would pick 5 instead of 3 at this point, but I think for me, the getting there is the problem. I think there are other things, I mean, we have to do a charter commission, I guess, and I think there are other things that we might want to look at doing if we did a charter commission in terms of the structure of the town.
Well, you just nailed something that Christine and I were talking about, that when I look at the charter, I think if I take one big giant step back, looking at the charter in general is something that we should be doing, right? And in the process is one of the things that look at how the Board of Selectmen is comprised. But I think it may be a very worthwhile exercise over the next 12 months to look at the charter, to see what is potentially kind of outdated, what may need to be added, because I don't think it's been looked at for quite some time. So that may be the bigger task at hand, and after we look at that, then look at the makeup of the selectmen, and then even just, I know there's a lot of questions around town with how our government is done here in Medfield. You know, we're a open town, we're a town meeting, we're a Board of Selectmen, we're not council, we're not RTM like Walpole, and I think your town meeting 101, Christine, I think it's really worthwhile for people that are moving here from Wisconsin, from Michigan, from Northern California, that they are not familiar with this at all, right? So to them, it may seem foreign, it may seem archaic, it may seem like this is a waste of time, there can be more efficient ways of doing it, but yet there is, if we go to our town charter of keeping to the history of the town and the character of the town, the way we govern is very true to the history of this town. So as we look at Town Meeting 101, I think there's value in also looking at why we do what we do and why other towns do what they do, and educate accordingly. Mark.
So just to address the point Pete raised, the traditional way is to do a charter commission, which is an elaborate and expensive process, but you don't have to do it that way either. You can do what most municipalities have been doing, which is you set up a committee to study the issue, come back with a draft and recommendations. You then go to town meeting and get authorization to file for special legislation. The whole package, whether it's a change in the number of select board members or it's the TA's responsibilities, or whatever it is, you make your proposed charter changes, you send it up to the legislature, and it passes as special legislation. They may send it back and require a ballot vote as opposed to just enacting it, but it's still way more streamlined and efficient than the charter commission route.
Right.
The other thing is you control it. With the charter commission, it's an elective process. Once you elect the commissioners, they are on their own. You have no control over them. They are autonomous, and ultimately they come in with a vote up or vote down proposal. So they can, it can get totally unintended consequences.
Okay.
I haven't, among my colleagues, I haven't really seen anybody using a charter commission.
Okay. Well, Denise Garlick's the one that had talked about going through legislation and all of that.
Right.
That was I think that's what we
You have the flexibility. You just set up a select board appointed committee if you want to, however you want to set it up, and then they do their charter work, and no pun intended, they report back with whatever it is they were requested to do, and then you go from there.
What's your take on it, Gus?
And for my part, the first thought I had when this question came up is I was reminded of one of my favorite clients when I first became a consultant. And he had a line that I've used for 40 years. If this is the answer, what's the question? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important question to ask if we're going to talk about changing things. Now, and that's true both for charter change or even as at a more micro level, a change in the Board of Selectmen. If we decide we want to undertake a charter, I actually would think if we were going to consider that, it might be incumbent on the three of us to take a close look at the charter and say, well, what is it about the charter that we think is the problem before we even get to the point of whether we're going to form a committee to look at it? Because if you form a committee to do a charter review, I can guarantee you'll get a charter change. But if you don't know what it is you're trying to change or what it is that's not working very well, I think that's problematic. So that would be my first thought. Speaking personally, and I've had some time to think about this at a broader level, not just triggered by this. I realize something. I'm an executive branch guy. I'm not a committee. I'm not a legislative guy. I watch some of our state reps, and it's like, man, I don't know I could tolerate doing your job because of what it takes to do it. The thing I like about this Board of Selectmen, first and foremost, is that we're both agile and we're capable of being decisive. We can make a decision and can do that. Secondarily, it takes some getting used to, but your point about transparency is sort of an important one. I've had to learn to be a lot more comfortable having conversations like this, knowing that it's going out on TV and people, I didn't prepare what I was going to say. I'm just saying what I'm saying, and they're going to hear it and they're going to react to it. Some of the things I'm going to say are going to be my opinion, and not everybody out there is going to agree with it. And I mean, for that matter, even when we were looking at replacing the police chief, that was one of the weirdest meetings we'd ever had. We had three people that we were interviewing, and then after the interviews were done, they all walked out. We were over at the library, and it's like, I guess we're processing this thing live on Medfield TV in front of an audience. Well, it's like, I've never done it that way. You always have these confidential discussions with people. So it took some getting used to. If we were to have 5, I think the idea that people would be able to have more conversations, it would be a more politicized organization, and it would also be a more cumbersome organization because it would be 5 people having to get to, you'd either have a lot more split votes, or you'd be more factionalized, or it would take a heck of a lot longer to get to everybody being in the same spot. So my personal reaction is, A, I don't know what the problem is we're trying to fix. B, I know that actually I like the job that we have the way it is because I like both the ability, it could be wrong, but I like the ability for us to be able to move fast, and I like the ability for us to be decisive. Because sometimes in democracies, things don't, people want to talk forever and you just can't. So from a personal standpoint, that's sort of where I come out on it. I'd have to know what the problem was that people feel is there before I'd have, I would entertain problems if they were real problems. I just don't see them. It's hard work. It takes a lot of time. And you have to get smart about a whole bunch of things, but having 5 people doesn't mean you don't have to get smart about those same things.
Right.
It's just that you have more people having to do it.
Right, and the only, the pros would be you can still have a meeting. Like, it's tough for us to have a meeting if Pete's not here, because if it comes down to a vote, it's 1-1 versus having that ability to have a healthier dialogue. Put 5, you have 5 for a full meeting, but you can still have 4 or 3 where it's tough.
So that would say with 5, it would be easier to leave somebody out. And I would say with 3, I can't think of there's certain times when somebody has to recuse themselves on a particular issue, but I can't think of, in the 5 years I've been here, Pete, I think there's been maybe 1 or 2 meetings that we've held that one of us couldn't make out of those 5 years. And then when we went to the remote option,
It's good.
that made it even better. So in terms of ever having meetings where we were down to, we've had issues where we were down to 2. Mike and I were in a standoff on lot 3 because Pete had to recuse himself, and we couldn't get to an agreement, and we just kind of locked horns and said, hey, we don't have an agreement. That's where we're at. But I don't think that's happened. I do want to comment on something that came up about town meetings. This is philosophy and this is personal opinion, and I do think it's one of the reasons I like that town meeting 101 kind of thing, is that I see too many people posting on Facebook primarily about, gee, can't we let us just do remote voting? I want the town meeting, I want to sit here in my living room couch with my glass of Chardonnay, and I want to push the thumb up or the thumb down button. That's how I'd like to do this, because it's too hard. I got kids, or I have to be there, or we want to eat dinner, we got nachos in the oven, whatever it is, it's too hard. The reason that doesn't work is because if we ever did go there, who would step up for the kinds of committees like the State Hospital Master Planning Committee, or the State Hospital Development Committee, or the school projects? Who would do that, putting the hundreds, if not thousands of hours into coming up with the absolute best recommendation they can, if it's going to be like the Roman Colosseum in the town meeting, where everybody's around there, and when the gladiator's on the ground, people either give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on how the mood strikes them. So the whole thing falls apart if people are not prepared to engage in democracy. And yeah, you can't always get both parents to be able to show up. We didn't get both parents to show up. It was one carrying the voice. But in the way we work, if you show up at a town meeting, you're voting for 10 or 12 people. We have a representative town meeting form of government. It's just that the representatives are self-selecting. They're the people who are willing, who care enough about the issues, who are willing to devote the time to show up. And they're voting for, generally speaking, you know, if you got 5% of the voting public shows up for a meeting, they have 20 votes. And so, the reason I bring that up is that people have to understand town government is not a concierge service. It sometimes operates that way, but if you're going to live somewhere to some degree, to the extent that you can commit and that you believe it's important to contribute to your community, you have to find a way to get involved. You don't have to be involved in everything. You don't have to spend 40 hours a week doing it. But the culture, I'm convinced if we could strengthen that culture of democratic engagement, a lot of the stuff that we say is causing major problems in our entire country right now in the political sphere would go away. Because if we can make it go away here, I'm settling for that. But you have, and look at the appointment lists we have. Look at the people who volunteer. We have an incredible town for that. It's important for us, I think, not to give that up. And you're right, some people from other parts of the country have never seen that. But it's not because that's what the Pilgrims did here. It's because it works if a community comes together and does it. And in a lot of ways, I think the three of us as selectmen, however feebly we do it, that's part of why we're here, and that's part of what I think we project, is at least you got three people that are at the top that you can see are, they may not be very good, but they're trying hard. You know, they're taking stuff on, and I would hope people throughout town would do that in the areas that they're interested in, which a lot of them do.
And so I appreciate this discussion tonight, because I will tell you, I was at the CAM event this past Saturday. People knew this was an agenda item, and I got people approaching me on more against than for, right? So I was like, which made me happy. Like, I wanted to have the discussion. This isn't just, this is what Eileen Murphy wants, so let's go push for it. It's like, okay, I'm here representing the citizens. I'm putting an idea out there. I've always wondered why, like why. So now we're having this discussion, we're learning more. And I think the message that came across to me from Saturday was what I said earlier. The fact that we can't talk about 3 to 5, except right here at this table, matters, right? A lot. And I take that to heart.
Yeah.
And so if to the citizens of Medfield, and certainly they watch this Zoom, they want to come back and say more, I'm now leaning more towards, I understand why it's 3. I think it keeps it very clean for the town. And I think that they should have a lot of trust that we do respect open meeting laws and that we are here for them, and this is the time we get to talk.
Now, I'll say one other thing, and I can say it because I'm the next one up for re-election. I think elections are far better when there are people who are coming forward with their own ideas and say, you know how you do it this way, but I think we should do it that way. Giving voters true options is the best democracy we can have. And I'm going on record on that, recognizing I'm the next one up. But the last time we've had a competed election was the first time I got elected And it was a three-way process, and it's no fun to lose, I'm sure, and I didn't, so that's worked out well for me, but the interest and the community involvement and the actual fact that people have to think about it, rather than, oh, well, okay, yeah, let's put him in. We'll just let him keep coming back until he finally, evaporates or throws the towel in. That's, when you get reelected that way, you're not sure whether it's because they really want you or if they're just going, he's stupid enough to want to do it. Let him do it. So, democracy that's vibrant is a democracy that has contested elections with people who provide options. This is not a popularity contest. It's,
Right.
Here's what I think we should do. That's not what you did. Here's what I think you should do. And you throw it up to the voters to say, which way do you want us truly to go? That's how it works when it's the best. So
Okay.
it's kind of like Democracy 101. First time I think we've quite hit that thing on a board of selectmen.
I'll invite you in as guest adjunct professors for my town meeting 101 class.
So we're done on that, yep.
We are,
Okay,
thank you.
All right, okay, action items, vote to propose, well, again, I'm not sure whether we'll approve it, but I forwarded a draft dog control bylaw along with 2 threads of Facebook, just so you could get a feel of 2 conversations that took place this week. There's a lot of, it's pretty clear from the Facebook discussions and posts, there's a lot of interest in this dog control issue.
Yes.
I think it's going to be really critical for this committee to have adequate representation of all of the voices that have views about this. We have to, we have to figure out how to bring, almost in a microcosm in a committee, we have to figure out how to bring the kinds of people that meet and are having difficulties out on the ground. We need to get them all, or not all of them, but we need to get representatives of them there. To say,
Absolutely.
tell us what to do. So this bylaw revision, I don't know that I had it exactly right, but at least in the interest of trying to move the ball ahead, I threw this down as a draft that you 2 could react to.
So I found out this afternoon, I said, where did this come from? So I got one guess, and I said, I think it might be Gus. So I'll be honest, I read through it, but if it's, read through it one more time and make the appropriate edits, if I can do that, that would be,
I think
would be
that's-
much
I think
appreciated.
that's fine. I had a draft last meeting, but with the comments that the 2 of you made, I never even shared that draft. And the reason was, I wrote the draft purely focused on the state hospital. And when we had the conversation in our last meeting, and you brought up Wheelock, and it's like, well, actually, I didn't want it to be, let's just rewrite the entire town's dog dog control bylaw, including what we do in neighborhoods, but you're right, there's a lot of open spaces, and really, it's the issue of what to do with dogs in all open spaces, so I didn't share that one. I tried to rewrite it on this one, and I was trying not to take more than 2 pages to do it. So you can see I get pretty close. So I think that's defined. It would be more important for us to get the expectations clear.
yes.
And then form the committee. People are quite happy to join, but we could probably make it through to the end of the month to get to a better charter and without any difficulty.
And Noon Hill is managed by the trustees, yeah? So it's like, we don't have Rocky Woods in there for the same reason. I think it's the trustees. Is it Noon Hill?
It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
there's,
The trustees' reservation.
there's 2 reservations up there, I think, actually.
Shattuck and Noon Hill are both trustees, yep.
So when I saw that, I was like, do we need to have Noon Hill? Because we were not including Rocky
Well, maybe
Woods, but those are
no,
both.
we don't, but, well, to be honest with you, I never thought of that as, I guess that's under the trustees too.
Their own policy on dogs.
Yeah, what threw me off is that I think our Conservation Commission has gone up there to take down the mountain bike
I
courses.
think there is a little chunk of land that the town owns up there, too.
Okay,
And then there's, of course, the Sportsman's Club in the middle. which
right.
is-
Well, I'm happy to cut things out that don't belong there. Probably things like the rail trail are one of the interesting things. Is it something we're going to address here? I think it is, but it's not like Wheelock in the state hospital. It's this linear resource that people, I think, do walk dogs on, but, and there have been incidents there, but,
And so I read the gentleman's email that came across this morning. You could have almost like crossed his name on it and put my name on it. I was chuckling. I was like, don't worry about it. I'm feeling more of, good dog owner, no one's there, it's okay, and then you have someone that just wants to poke. And so what I've been wrestling with is we have that sign up at the quad that we know we can't enforce. Right, so it's like it's a great suggestion, but we're not enforcing it. So if you tell me somebody can't do something, and then they do it, the person that watches the person violate, you get so angry because you're like, okay, they're not supposed to do that. So I've been thinking, is it of value to help people at the state hospital police amongst themselves to say, you're entering an area where it is highly recommended for safety of others that all dogs are on leashes. So it's not this, it must be, it's now that you walk by without a dog on a leash, and I'm like, excuse me, see this? Like, could you mind putting, because this is the safe area.
well, I mean, so I gave an initial response back to the same guy, a little harder nosed than what you probably did, and to his credit, he came back. And we actually had a very good exchange back and forth because I pushed a little harder back because it's like, you bring your dog, it says no, you read the sign, it says dogs have to be on a leash. You made the determination that you could take your dog off the leash because of this set of circumstances. Somebody else makes a similar determination that they can take their dog off the leash because their dog is a friendly dog. And that's where it all falls apart. And I pointed out that there have been CAM events where there are dogs wandering, not a lot, but there's dogs wandering through the crowd. And there was a month ago, there was a dog wandering through the crowd that didn't have a collar on. And so there was no even easy way to collar the dog. And then finally, the guy that did it, who wasn't even with the dog wandering through the crowd, he was somewhere farther out of this, and he happened to drift in. He's got the leash with the collar, so instead of just undoing the leash, he undid the collar. So, and then you send your dog into an event with a crowd of people where people are sitting on the ground with food and there's little kids, and you're not even with your dog. This was like 10 or 15 minutes before this guy showed up. I don't know what goes on in someone's head that does that, but I don't think having a thing that says it's recommended, I don't think that would have changed his behavior.
Well, but here's the deal, and it's not going to change his behavior, but I would estimate, I'll say there were 100 dogs. So 99 are following the rules, and you got the one guy that blows it. So we changed the rules for one person?
Yeah, when the dog knocks people to the ground. Yeah, you do. You could kill somebody. And my point, we're not on that committee, so I'm not, in our discussion here, everybody's hearing two sides of the philosophy.
Oh,
there,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
good. But that's my whole point for why this committee needs to have all these different facets, because I think a lot of people care a lot about this.
Oh, yeah.
We put that committee and say, you guys help us. There's some great ideas, John Thompson, and I'm not sure if it's the same thing you were involved with, Mark, or not. I know you had the draft bylaws, and what John Thompson sent me an email that had like 8 attachments.
That's what Pete shared with me a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of things we can provide inputs to that for that committee. I think there's some ideas that we have. Personally, I've concluded that the best strategy is to basically make people better understand that their personal responsibility will be visible. So mandatory, maybe the registration ideas where people actually have to get their name and their dog name and their address, and maybe they pay something to be there and there's an identification. All of a sudden they know, gee, if I start messing things up here, that's going to be what? Maybe a mandatory reporting requirement so that when there's an altercation, doesn't necessarily mean somebody's done something totally wrong, but if the same dog keeps showing up on multiple reports, it's like all of a sudden we can start to home in on owners and dogs that probably aren't appropriate there.
Yeah.
And the real issue isn't to catch people and punish people. The real issue is that when people know that they're going to be held accountable,
But how are they going to be held accountable?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So strategies around mandatory reporting, strategies maybe around registration, where there's, it's kind of like the license plate on the dog kind of thing. I haven't tried to answer the whole question, but my point is, the whole point of that isn't to find ways to punish people. It's to put people in a situation where they realize the accountability loop is more likely to be there for them personally. And there's a lot of research that shows when people understand that there are sanctions associated with their behavior gets a whole lot better, as opposed to being left on their own. So it's a psychological strategy. It's not a.
Well, and you're creating a societal expectation for people too. You're saying, here's what the norms are going to be. Here's what the expectations of you are, and here are the rules too. So that if you go outside of those areas, then here's what's going to happen to you. So
some of this will take care of itself. The quad is going to take care of itself in 3 years.
Right.
But that's 3 years. We don't want to wait 3 years. And then even when that happens, you still have the rest of the state hospital property. You still have the Wheelock property.
Mm-hmm.
You
Still the
might
rail
have
trail.
the athletic field. There's a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So if we can get an answer for all of that, that's, I think.
I was interested to notice from an engaged citizen put me onto the DCR dog regulations, and apparently you're not allowed to have dogs off leash up at the Medfield State Hospital property that belongs to DCR.
Yeah, there's a sign right on the Bay Circuit Trail says dogs must be on a leash. When's the last time you saw a dog on a leash? They're worse at enforcing their rules than we are.
Because they're not going to, right? I mean, so that's the I gotcha, that if we're waiting for some third party to enforce it versus peer enforcement, that this area is a safe area. For like the reasons why we're doing it, instead of all dogs must be on leash, it's the explaining why are we doing that. Because the quad for the next 3 years, well, probably next year, because in 2 years hopefully they're starting to build, but people should be able to walk up there and not have to fear. So whether somebody's got a baby in a stroller, an older person's out for a walk, or you just want to go and not get jumped on and get dirty by muddy paws,
Right.
and a citizen should be able to say to another, hey, see the sign? Could you get your dog on a leash? It's like, this is the safety zone. It's not the sign's going to tell you you're going to get a $50 fine, because that's
Right.
like paperweight.
One of the things that surprised me, I didn't really realize until last week and a half, reading posts, I was shocked at the number of dog owners who won't go there anymore.
Oh, I just saw one last night at the high school whose
Yeah.
dog got bit, and she said it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not even dog owners versus the world. It's actually dog owners who are confident that their dogs are not going to do anything terrible versus dog owners who just don't really want to have to wonder about it. And of course, as soon as you set up a dynamic, one dog on a leash, one dog off a leash, the dog on the leash is automatically concerned, it's threatened because it's tied to the leash. This other dog that's coming at it is totally free. So you can create problems in the dog that's not the problem being approached by the dog that's loose, and the dog that's loose is totally friendly. But the dynamic, that's why when we're up there, if a dog is approaching us off the leash, we ordinarily, when we're approaching somebody, it's good training for our dog.
Yeah.
Make her sit, we put the leash on until we get past somebody who's walking or somebody with a dog. But if somebody's coming at us with the dog off the leash, we first stop, put the leash on, we start to walk. If they don't stop and put the leash on, we sit again, take the leash off. And that's because our dog can run faster than almost any dog that's up there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to tie him to us. It's like our dog knows how to take care of herself in terms of getting away. She's, it's a poodle, so she's not going to sit there and take on a Weimar on her.
Well, again, it goes down to, it's frustrating because most good dog owners
Sure.
are walking up to you, they see your dog on a leash, I'm like, hey, you cool, my dog's off leash. And most dog owners that are not comfortable, they'll say, do you mind putting on a leash? No problem. There's a gentleman that walks through the high school, and if I see him coming, I know he has told me his dog thinks my dog's a stuffed animal, he will probably chew it. Like, okay, I will avoid your dog, and I will make certain that we literally go separate ways, because I know, he knows his dog well enough. Thank you for letting me know that. Right?
But, so does he put his dog on a leash?
Yeah, his dog's on a leash.
Dog's on a
Oh,
leash.
yeah, yeah,
See, my point there is it's not incumbent on the person who doesn't want the contact from the dog to ask the dog owner to put the dog on the leash. It's incumbent on the dog owner to put their dog on a leash until they can determine that the other owners know, no, my dog likes to play too. Okay, let's let him go. And that's in, in the back of the state hospital out in the field, the dogs are all loose and, you can kind of generally figure out what's going on well before we get any close altercations. But, and they're fundamentally always friendly in our experience. But that's the one place, and I think a lot of dog owners do this. They'll say on a place like Rocky Woods, I know for a fact this happens. People, you'll be out walking with a friend who has there, it is a good dog. The dog's off the leash. They come up on somebody and their dog goes bounding up to the person. They go, oh, don't worry, he's friendly. It's like, yeah, but some people are just afraid of dogs. It doesn't matter whether the dog's friendly. They're afraid of them. And that's not their problem. That's your problem if you're the one with the dog. So,
This
like
is
I
not
said,
an easy task, I'm
no,
going to tell you right now.
Which is why I think we
Not an
should
easy-
throw it at a committee and
But I
and
think
see
some
what
of the
they come
people
up
that
with.
have reached out, I think, are fantastic because either they have a business for walking dogs in the Medfield residents,
Yep.
so they have seen it all. They've got people that are good dog owners, and they're like, okay, I don't want to be penalized unharshly.
Right.
And then people that have been injured, hurt, or afraid. So yeah, I think I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
we will start notifying people before the next meeting or
I
after
think
the
you
next
want
meeting.
the charter.
I think you
charter
want
first?
usually the
Okay.
charter first, and then you'll, once
Right.
we confirm
So I
the
can make
charter.
edits and bring them and get them to you. Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So I had two general suggestions on the charter. One was I would let the committee decide what areas in town they should be focusing on. I wouldn't constrain them, basically. And then the other issue that I had was I wasn't sure how you're gonna get representatives of the state hospital or the Wheelock properties. That was just sort of a mechanical thing. I didn't know exactly how that would.
Are you talking about the abutters, or are you talking about the actual representatives from those two properties? Because I basically said, on that list, I put abutters of both those properties, because there's a special group of people, like at the end of Long Meadow, and the people, and I gather the people over by the Wheelock that live there, that deal with dog people that show up and bring their dogs out of their cars right there. And then I threw a representative from the state
Yeah, the
hospital only to open
representative
up.
was the one that I didn't understand so much.
And what I was doing there is who I had in mind was somebody like John Thompson.
Okay.
So I had a thought for the state hospital. I wasn't sure whether somebody from perhaps the schools at Wheelock, or somebody responsible for the athletic fields at Wheelock. I just was trying to be even-handed, because I'm thinking there's certain people at the state hospital that have, great in-depth
Oh, I could-
perspective
At
on
this
this.
point,
that would
yeah.
probably-
I could look for somebody from Medfield Soccer would probably have some
Yeah.
comments on the
Yeah.
Wheelock properties,
So that-
because
that
on a
was-
Saturday and a Sunday, that's a huge soccer with small families, dogs, the whole shebang.
I didn't put it down specifically, I don't think, but I mean, I've always thought having somebody from VizWiz, if there's a dog group that, as far as I can see, has used the state hospital in as responsible a way as they can, and has put the time and effort into trying to clean the place up to make up for what others did, it's that group. So somebody can inform me if I have the wrong impression of them, but that would be an example of an organized dog owners group that has been consistently trying hard to be more than responsible for themselves in order to keep the property available for their dogs. So I would kind of like to see them have a voice in this committee, or have somebody they would designate to just represent that view.
I think the big curveball is going to be, there's so many non-Medfield residents that as we move down this path, how do we make sure we educate people coming in from Rentham, from Foxborough, from North Attleboro? Like even your idea, which I'm not against at all, like if we're going to register, it's easy to send the residents of Medfield when they're doing their dog license, like here's a form we want you to fill out if you use Medfield State Hospital. But how do you get somebody who comes in out of the blue from North Attleboro, pulls in to get them registered?
Or maybe this committee says you don't. We got so many dogs that we have a big enough issue with just our own dogs. You go walk your dogs in your own town.
No.
The same issue with, professional dog walkers. Like that's, I
Stop taking pictures of all of the cars
Yeah.
They should have their tags on, and then it's a question of whether there's some way to get that information into a record, but the rabies tag, that's the driver. I mean, you have a dog that potentially isn't vaccinated, or you have no way of knowing.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard a comment a couple of weeks ago that, about a dog walker that basically said, oh, this is, we come here because this is like the only place we can do this. And of course, I reacted differently to that comment because it's like, well, maybe that's a comment on us, not a comment on them.
Well, it's a beautiful piece of property. Not most
Yeah.
towns have what we have in the Charles River going through it, and I
Right.
mean, we have a gem. So.
Right.
So, I just throw this out for something to consider, which is coming at it from the opposite side, which is there a portion of the state hospital property or some other public property that could be wide open once you're authorized to be there, so that dogs can run?
Right.
You can let, and people understand that that's what the purpose is, and there won't be any oversight as far as policing or
Right,
whatever
right.
restrictions. They'll be able to take their dog off a line or whatever and let them go, because that's what the dog wants,
Right.
if there's enough room to do that.
Yeah, I
the
think-
idea of that. I hate a fence too.
Right.
No, that's a bad. Unless
some
we have
some people would want it,
multiple
but-
acres, no way.
I wouldn't want to dedicate, would you dedicate the north field, put a fence around and call it a dog park?
No.
No?
No.
And you can't do anything that's too small, because
Right.
I mean, down in Connecticut, there's a town that has a beautiful, I don't know how many acres, and it's a dedicated dog park. So you never have that dog that's fearful that it's caged in. But the last thing you want is a dog that's aggressive and then pins a dog against a fence because it's not big enough to really run. Oof.
You have to manage it too. When you find a dog like that, you've got to weed it out. The person's no longer welcome to bring the dog back there or anything else.
Right. So that's a lot of overhead, plus.
That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah, this is
You
so
have-
not easy.
you have
I'm
a
not
committee
convinced
that-
our problem is so dire that we need that kind of a solution, to be honest with
You
you.
do have a committee that runs the garden plots, for better
Runs
or
the-
worse, and so you set up some kind of a committee that has oversight for how the dog
Yeah,
areas are run.
that might even,
But again, if there's an infraction, what happens? Will there be a penalty paid, or it'll just
It goes
be?
back to you, they tend to police themselves, and if people,
That's what I would like to say. That's why I say even that sign of the state hospital today, the way it's written is, it's like, okay, it's not allowed, period, versus explaining why it's encouraged, because that's really all that sign is encouraging, is there's no infraction, there's no $50 fine, so it doesn't matter. But if you explain why, then you kind of look like an ass if you're here's the reason why, this is so everyone can be safe and secure, small children, old people alike, and you just say, screw it, you look like a jerk, and you're probably going to be nicely asked to,
well, yeah, I'd be open to a more explanatory sign than just dogs have to be on a leash,
Yeah.
Let us tell you the story,
well,
But
think
no,
about seniors,
no,
think about
yeah,
small children.
sure, yeah.
Think about, not everybody loves a dog, it's
Okay,
not easy.
all right.
Okay.
So we're at least moving in the right direction on that one, and we'll hope to maybe finalize it next, on the 30th.
Yes.
Let's see, next, vote to approve a contract with UMass Boston Collins Center for a compensation classification plan to be funded by a $25,000 grant received from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Community Compact Best Practices Program.
So we are working with the Collins Center. We're, as you know, finalizing the GFOA budget, and now we're getting ready to launch the compensation and classification plan, which is for any non-union or managerial positions. I'm actually still working with them on a scope of work. I thought we'd have it finalized for today, but we're still working on that, so that'll come back up on the 30th.
Is that a market study of what we pay people, or is that a structural study about what you should have? So
Both. Not in terms, it's a structural study in looking at where we have people slotted into that current structure now, and looking whether or not that structure is efficient. It's not looking at adding new positions. It's not making recommendations for new positions. It's looking at what is existing.
Okay,
So,
okay. So that'll show up in our next
I should
meeting.
be able to finalize the contract with them on the 30th. But the last one, just an aside, the last one that we completed was, I believe we completed it in 2013 or 2014. So it's been a number of years since we've done it.
Okay. Next, we have board, committee, and individual appointments and reappointments per listings attached to the meeting agenda. so we can all turn to the meeting agenda. And we'll start with the Medfield State Hospital Development Committee. Let's see, Mark, we can get by without reading all the names on these reappointments?
Because we read them before, right? I think last time we did.
Did we read them last time?
Yeah.
I thought we didn't read them last time.
Oh, I thought
but we
Pete
did the
got
time
stuck with
before
it.
that.
No, you read them last time.
We did read them
I
last time.
thought Pete got stuck with
Okay.
it.
Well, Pete, we'll,
I think you took them up as groupings.
yeah, we took them up in groupings.
Yes.
So I would move to reappoint to the Medfield State Hospital Development Committee Todd Treyabenko, Johnny Martinez, Patrick Casey, Gus Murby, and Chris McMahon.
Okay, and then-
Current
and
term
then we'll,
expires, it's 1-year appointment.
And then, can we bundle that with an appointment for Christine as well to get the whole thing, or do we
Oh, sure. Appoint Christine ex officio non-voting member for a year, too.
have a
Second.
second? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Those
I
are-
would move to appoint to the Energy Committee, reappoint to the Energy Committee Penny Connor, Cynthia Green, George Whiting, James Redden, Andrew Jarrell, and appoint Emily Lowney for a 1-year appointment, and reappoint as ex officio members Amy Colleran, Christine Terweiler, and Osler Peterson, apparently.
Apparently.
He seems to be listed here. Osler P. Peterson, that should be an L.
Will I second that?
I don't know, the last one that you
I
just
was a little, I
nominated
know, I got a little
is
sketchy at
an
the end there.
imposter. Yes.
No, I second.
Okay, all those in
He's
favor?
not so reputable.
We don't require reputability, simply a willingness to serve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, those are approved.
I would then, for the Historical Commission, I would vote to reappoint Maria Baller,
So
Joe,
you've got varying terms here, so.
So
3-year
do
terms.
the 3-year term. Do the 3-year
for
term.
3-year terms.
You do them all, we just have to identify what,
Okay. To reappoint Maria Baller, Joe Opiello, and Kirsten Poehler for 3-year terms, and to reappoint Thomas Connors, an associate, for a 1-year term, and John Thompson as an associate for a 1-year term.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one's
I would
done.
move to appoint to the Board of Registrars Margaret Vassatoro, reappointment for a 3-year term.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's done. Next. Guess I
So are
think
we
work our
not
way down-
reappointing any of these?
Huh?
Are we not reappointing any of these because it?
We are.
No, you are.
No, we are reappointing all the
That's listed on there.
2022s.
Oh, wow, okay.
Looks like Marion's good till 2024, but everybody else is 2022.
So I would suggest on these individual appointments that we, unless it's really important that we read all of these names, I mean, we've got 3 pages of names here, we've got 50 to 60 names probably. I would suggest that we just appoint them all.
Can Pete appoint them by page, Mark? They were attached to the agenda.
to be perfectly honest, I don't even know what the legal validity of some of these are, given, I mean, you're reappointing police officers.
Some are ceremonial, correct?
I don't know what we should do about Joe Ryan, because he's on this list, and obviously we can't reappoint him, so.
Correct. I do have one change for you under inspections. I inadvertently left out Michael Mancini, who is an assistant, alternate electrical inspector.
Well,
Oh, inspections, okay. So you do have an alternate electrical, so you're gonna add another one?
We have a second one,
Okay.
yeah. I just, he was already appointed last year. I just inadvertently left him off this list.
Oh, what's his last name, Mancini?
Mancini.
Okay.
to be perfectly honest, I don't recall being present or how we've done individual appointments in the past.
We voted him by page.
By page,
And sometimes I think we voted the whole list.
You have voted the whole list. You could vote the whole list, given the two changes, adding in Michael Mancini as the alternate electrical inspector and not reappointing Joseph Ryan as town greeter.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.
Aye. Okay. Opposed? That carried. We'll let it go at that, and if anybody doesn't like the way we conduct our ceremonial appointments, they can submit a letter. All right, vote to approve lease, power purchase agreement, and pilot agreement with Select for the solar project at the DPW Town Garage. I will confess that I started trying to read it, ran out of time. On the other hand, this is something we actually have reviewed in the
You have
past.
reviewed it.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, you reviewed it in April and you were ready to approve in April. We were just trying to negotiate the pilot and the tax payments, and the
So as
PPA.
far as I'm concerned, maybe if we could just get briefly on the outcome of the pilot negotiation that held this thing up for 3 months and where we came out on it, that might be enough.
Well, there were a few different pieces. We worked through some legal issues between Mark and their attorney, just in terms of insurance and a few other items that Mark was looking to have addressed. We also had to work through an issue around real property taxes. With a change in law last year, whether or not communities were assessing real property taxes on solar installations on municipal property is kind of an open question. But with the law changing last year, it's clear that they do need to pay real property taxes on the lease. So we inserted language and an assessed value into the new PPA to ensure that they pay real property taxes. It's a small amount. It's $871 based on the value right now. The value is $4 a square foot based on the amount of the roof that they'll use, and then that value will remain locked in for the life of the lease. So their annual real property tax bill will fluctuate with our tax rate. And then there were some additional conversations about the applicability of prevailing wage to this project, as this is not a municipal project. We don't have any ownership of it. We're not putting up any money up front. The state agreed with us that prevailing wage is not applicable, and that brought the PPA rate down from 5.8 cents a kilowatt hour down closer to 4. The final number is 4.1 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's a pretty significant change to our benefit in terms of the price we pay. We're paying about 9.7 cents a kilowatt hour for supply for electricity, so we'll be less than half that for everything that comes off of this solar array. And as you saw earlier with Patrick's presentation, those electricity costs are going up. So when our next contract comes up, I'm sure our basic service rate for supply will be higher. But for right now, we're looking at about savings of about half of what we're paying today. And this is on about 250,000 kilowatt hours per year of production.
So if you're inclined to act tonight, there was some back and forth. This has all been relatively last minute, and it wasn't our doing, as to the execution process and the form it was going to take. I'm old-fashioned because that's where the law still is. I still like to see signed hard copies. And when you're dealing with something like this, I want to see the other party sign before the town signs.
Yep.
Because whoever signs is bound,
Right.
and you can get yourself into some really tough situations as a property owner if you sign and something happens. So my recommendation, if you do anything, would be to vote either to put it off for them to create the hard copies, sign them, and present them. Alternatively, vote to sign them, subject to their doing that. And you c- if they come in the interim, you could then go ahead and sign it.
And I think, Christine, you put out if we didn't act on this tonight, it needs to be acted on before 30 August, so we would have to figure out some way to create another meeting that we could actually act on it. So I would,
Right.
as long as the two of you are satisfied that the terms you reached with this agreement are in the interest of the town, there's no landmines in there, I would be inclined to say we approve signing it pending them signing it, and then we just have to
Just
figure out
by
how to get back.
comparison to some other established municipalities, what we were able to accomplish, I'm pretty proud of the job that Nick and I were able to do, so.
Okay.
And just as a one change as to what's on the agenda, the pilot agreement itself still has some legal stuff to be cleaned up, so that should come back. The terms of the pilot are that they will pay $6 per kilowatt, installed kilowatt, which amounts to about just shy of $1,400 in year one. That will decline over the course of the period. So the value of the pilot is getting locked in and referenced in the PPA, but the pilot agreement itself will come back at a future date. The pilot agreement still references that they won't pay real property taxes, but they are. So still just a few cleanups that need to be done in that.
So tonight, we're talking about signing the PPA agreement
And the lease.
with the and then there'll be a pilot agreement that we'll sign down the road.
There's 3 agreements.
Yeah.
3, okay, that's what okay,
Power.
got it. The lease, we're approving signing the lease and the power purchase agreement, not the pilot agreement.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions or comments from Eileen or Pete?
No.
I'm okay going ahead with it. I just had one question, Nick. We're going to be able to use the electricity, because I see that we're required to buy it.
Yes, so this site will produce more than the garage uses in a year. So the savings would then be pushed to other town accounts.
So we can
Good.
just transfer it around, okay.
So I think they use about 170,000 kilowatt hours, and this would generate, I think,
250.
250. So there is,
Yep.
public safety buildings are probably a logical place, but
Yep.
we'll figure that out.
I just didn't want to have to buy electricity that we weren't going to use somewhere, so that's my concern.
We are not, it's not like we'll use the electricity, we're just it's getting sent to the grid, we're just buying it, so it's just a transaction in that sense.
Okay, get a motion?
So I would move to approve the lease, power purchase agreement with Select for the solar project at the DPW Town Garage, subject to their signing first.
Subject to their preparing hard copies and executing them and delivering them to the town.
As stated by the town council.
Second?
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So those are both approved. And we just need to know when to come by to.
We'll let you know as soon as,
Okay.
as soon as we have them.
Next, vote to authorize the town administrator to sign a contract for auditing services with Mellinson for fiscal year 2022. The proposed fee for that is $32,000 plus an additional $5,000 to produce the school end-of-year report.
Correct. This is our second year with Melanson as our auditing firm, and this represents a $500 increase over last year's contract, and then we have one more year with them next year.
Is this the actual audit of the town's?
Mhm.
So that's a full-blown audit?
Yep.
You have clean books? Okay. Any
No questions, no. but-
No questions, no.
That was the only question I was trying to figure out, was whether it was truly it seemed like a low price for an audit of a $67 million a year operation, but that's, okay, I like that.
So I move to authorize the town administrator to sign the contract for auditing services with Melanson for the fiscal year 2022.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Is that the right fiscal year, Chris?
For fiscal year '22, they usually we're a year behind, so it'll be prepared. They've already started working on it, and then it'll be prepared in the spring.
Next, vote to sign the SMOC, Low Income Water Assistance Program contract.
So this is a really interesting program, and we're excited about it. They've been working, SMOC's been reached out and has been working with Brittany, who in turn has been working with Medfield Outreach on this program. And we currently have approximately 20 residents who qualify for fuel assistance through the SMOC program, and Medfield Outreach is the intake organization in Medfield for that. SMOC has received funding from the federal government to assist those residents who have already qualified for fuel assistance with water assistance. And so we've been working with Outreach. We've identified those approximately 20 people who would qualify. We have worked with Water and Sewer administration and with the treasurer's office to determine whether or not it'd be possible for us. We've worked out a policy on how we're going to do it, and we'll be able to give those funds. Those funds will come directly to the town, and then we'll be able to offset those balances on any water accounts for them.
Questions, Eileen?
Nope.
Pete?
No questions.
Mark?
So I did review the agreement at the request, actually Brittany requested. The only problem I have is there is an indemnity hold harmless provision. Somehow or other, the state's involved in this, and specifically DHCD. There's no negotiation there. That's simply the way it is. The indemnity hold harmless also runs to SMOC, which incidentally is the South Middlesex Opportunities Council. They're not a government agency. They're a nonprofit. So the indemnity hold harmless runs to them as well. I did have Brittany reach out, or requested Brittany to reach out to them today, and they wouldn't budge on the provision, so it is what it is. I wanted you to be aware of that.
So I had a more fundamental question. I started reading the article of the contract, and because the vendor line was blank, as I was reading through it, trying to understand it, I was basically saying, is our water department the vendor?
Yes.
Yes,
So our water department, so if I.
We're the vendor, the town's
we're the vendor.
Well, the town was, but, okay, so when I read through the contract, if I understood how it worked, it seemed like what happened was that the vendor was the supplier of water. The vendor submits a bill. First, it sounded like the vendor sent the bill to the people that are using the water, but somehow or other that went into the system, and then SMOC has like a subsidy or something that comes back, and that's then credited against the balance due on the bill. So it felt like it was, we were the ones selling the water. We were sort of billing it out at the normal cost, but then we were getting this payment coming back into us that allowed us to reduce the, so I did follow that the right way.
Yes, we're accepting it as a payment. If the people who currently qualify and are receiving fuel assistance are up to date and current on their water bills, then we would allow this to be entered as a credit
Right.
for future water billings for them. So if they wouldn't be penalized for having paid their water bills and not be eligible for this funding, it would go for future accounts.
So then back to your point, Mark, trying to understand what actual risk we're indemnifying SMOC for. Is it the risk that they don't get the money from the state, and so we think they're going to send us something and we don't get it?
It's any, quote, act or omission of the town, or it's just a very broad boilerplate indemnity hold harmless. As a practical matter, it probably isn't gonna generate any exposure, but I just gotta let you know it's there and it's non-negotiable.
So that would be like if we
It could be anything.
If we were like Flint, Michigan, and it turned out we've been pumping lead-laced water to these people because we wanted to, then SMOC wouldn't, we would be indemnifying SMOC from being associated with such
We
a,
basically go to any possible conceivable situation where a claimant attempted to drag either DHCD or SMOC into litigation.
okay, because I don't see a lot of
I
risk
didn't-
there, given the only downside would be that they don't come through with the money for
And
some
we
reason.
have dealt with the issue with Maya before, and they generally provide coverage under contractual liabilities.
Doesn't seem like a big risky thing to me, okay.
No, I didn't think so. I think it's a really great program for us to participate in.
Yeah, okay.
I just didn't want,
No,
I never said anything, then
no,
the one time something happened.
If there's a paragraph in a contract that I pay attention to, it's anything that starts with the word indemnification. The only second one is the payment cost. But- All right, then we got a.
I would move to sign the SMOC Low-Income Water Assistance Program contract.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, okay.
Did you catch these?
No, my battery ran out, so
Oh,
let's see. Thank you. Let's see, we have some questions to two of them from Hilly Passas, and one from Fred Davis. Actually, let's start with Fred's, because he said, thank you, BOS, for your support of the solar project. So we'll thank you, Fred. We'll start with that. And let's see, if I go from the bottom to the top, I think I go from the bottom to the, no, I go from the top to the bottom. So Hilly asked, I recently had an experience, oh, this is the dog thing. Boy, sorry, Hilly. I recently had an experience at MSH with 3 dog walkers with more than a dozen dogs off leash, clearly not able to control the dogs by voice commands. I reminded them that dogs have to be leashed, and the 3 young people walked away, asking me to mind my own business and aggressively wishing me a nice day repeatedly. Hilly Passas, 24 Mile. Thanks for that input, Hilly, and I'm sorry that happened. I find that when I wear work boots, both the dogs and the owners respect me a lot more. The dogs for sure stay beyond the range of my leg, because I hold my eyes on them and they know exactly what I have in mind. And then secondly, Christine, how come Eric Shand was not appointed to the MEC? I confirmed to Nick that Eric wants to become a full member. Thanks, Hilly.
I have not had a chance to follow up with Hilly since I received that, and our policy is when we receive that we touch base with the chairs of the committee to make sure they're okay with the appointment. I just didn't have a chance to do that before this agenda went out.
fine.
So I apologize, Hilly. We'll get that on there for the 30th.
Billy's the chair of the committee now, so.
Yes, and I just didn't have a chance to talk
Well, that's
to her
why we
about it.
didn't do it, Hilly. You know, we got to break 2 chairs in. We don't want high expectations.
But she seems to be saying that she's in favor of it at the moment.
I want to see this guy's resume. All right. Sorry to miss those, Hilly, to start.
She said thank you, though.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
She's still being civil to me. That's good. We have a consent agenda, 4 items. First one, Medfield Cultural Alliance requests a 1-day all alcohol license for August 4th and September 9th. So it's requesting 2 1-day all alcohol licenses for August 4th and September 9th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. for the Belforge Arts Center for a small fundraising event. Second, Medfield Cultural Alliance requests permission to hang a Belforge banner on the fence at the Medfield State Hospital entrance. I'm making an assumption that that's a permanent installation in that it doesn't call out dates.
Right.
3, the Trustees of Reservations is partnering with Coolidge After Midnight for a scary movie night at Rocky Woods and requests a 1-day beer wine permit for the event on Friday, July 29th from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. with a rain date of July 30th.
Yes, this is the one that you and I discussed, and you gave them a
okay,
provisional
yes, yes.
authorization, but we wanted a formal
Okay, that's
authorization.
right, too. Now, it's all coming
Because we
back to
weren't
me.
meeting and they,
We weren't meeting, and we didn't think it was, we thought it was straightforward enough that we could do that. And then finally, Jack's Abbey Brewing requests a 1-day beer wine license for August 10th for their annual staff outing in Rocky Woods from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Any discussion, Eileen?
No, I
Pete?
support them all.
No,
Can I get a motion?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all 4 items on the consent agenda are approved. Next, meeting minutes. We have 3 sets of meeting minutes, May 4th, 2021, October 1st, 2019. And the typo on the agenda, it's not August 29th, 2019, it's August 19th, 2019. So I guess you're
I am.
out of this completely.
I am.
It's just you and me, Pete.
I wasn't even thinking of running for selectman back then.
I was good with all 3. I had several minor typos on May 4th, 1 minor typo on October 1st, 2 minor typos on August 19th. At least most of those had to do with people's names being spelled wrong. So,
I think I had small edits on all of them. None of them really changed the context of what was being related.
Okay.
So I would move the acceptance of the 3 minutes with the edits.
I
indicated.
second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I did find that one of the Google Docs actually, when I started making changes, wasn't tracking, and so
You
I
had
had
to go for the
I had to
corner.
figure out how to,
Yeah.
how to do
not working in Google Docs, I didn't know how to.
I figured
Take
out,
that-
if you go in the upper right corner, there's like it's a
Yeah, it's a
review button or
drop-down
something,
menu,
you drop down,
yeah.
and you basically say,
didn't
make
take me too
suggestions.
long to
You go
find it.
suggestions. That happened to me, too. Okay.
But you didn't leave it set for me then.
I did. Well, I apparently, I couldn't change it permanently, because I didn't change it
Oh.
back. I just I was thinking I probably had done that, but obviously Brittany is on a power trip where she controls. Town administrator updates.
A few things for you tonight. Just want you to mark your calendars. We have a tentative rail trail grand opening for October 1st of 2022. And I know things tend to fill up in the fall rather quickly, so I want to get that on your calendar.
October 1st, you said?
October 1st,
So what's that again?
the rail trail grand opening.
Oh, the grand opening, okay.
I wanted to let you know, Brenda Healy, our public health nurse, is now serving on the National Association of County and City Health Officials, also known as NACHO. Yeah, I really just wanted to say that, so. Yeah. Sadly, we received a resignation letter from Charlie Peck. It'll appear on your next agenda, but he is resigning from the ZBA after over 30 years of service. And we will start advertising now, but we'll have the official resignation on your agenda. And lastly, I just want to say congratulations to Nick on his selection as the next town administrator for the town of Milton. It is a huge loss for the town and my team, but such an amazing opportunity for Nick and his family. And we will now start the very friendly competition of whose meetings are shorter. So I expect to win you three. No, we're all shorter.
I've seen their agendas. Their agendas are long.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And they have 5 members.
Yeah. There you go, yeah.
And now that you signed the select
Good luck with
contract,
that, Nick.
he can actually go. I told him he couldn't leave till the select contract was signed, so
Okay.
he can officially leave
I'll
now.
still be here for the next meeting, so that's really the last one.
Very good. Let's see, next meeting is August 30th. And selectmen reports. Eileen.
Alrighty, well, I do want to pass along my congratulations to Nick. It's a loss for Medfield, but a big win for Milton, so we wish him well. And then I just want to make a couple of comments on things I've seen around town. I think it was last weekend, the Little League, I don't know if anyone was aware, but the Mass State Championships for Little League were hosted here at Metacomet Park. That you had Westfield, Braintree, Cohasset, they do like 6 or 7 towns. Very well run. Like they had, I came home from the Cape and there was no parking signs up and down Metacomet and up and down Pleasant. So of course all my neighbors called me and then I called Christine. And Westfield was walking by my end of my driveway and I'm like, hey, what's going on? They did a great job. They had it so that in the Metacomet parking lot were just staff and I think immediate support group, but everyone else was directed to the high school. And I will tell you, no one parked on Metacomet. No one parked on Pleasant. It was very well run. And you know what? And I wish I bumped into the gentleman whose name escapes me right now, and I feel embarrassed by that. He ran it. He was responsible for the whole event. Yes, Jim Hatch. I knew it was something with a J. Phenomenal job. And he said this is something that towns fight for, that we won't do it again for at least another 10 years because it's like winning the Final Four. So just kudos to them. That was nicely done. And I was at the CAM event this past Saturday. I hadn't been up there in a little while. Great. I love the way they're tweaking it. Now they've moved the stage so they're not right in the beating sun. And then I will give kudos because I don't think we've had a meeting since the North Street project wrapped up.
That's great.
They did a very nice job. It's nice to drive down enough to bob and weave over the tops. And I will also give kudos, and Christine knows this, walking my dog through the high school last night, I looked over, and my pet peeve has been the tennis courts because they look like crap. And I'm not quite sure. I did bump into Mike LaFrancesca today, and I said, Mike, it looks good. I know there's some cracks to fill, but you drive into the high school now. There aren't weeds growing in the middle of the tennis court. They got rid of the pine needles that have been there since like last September.
That's very nice.
I mean, it represents a town, right? So especially with all those people last weekend, you want to make it look nice. So they did a great job, and he talked to me about what they'll do next to fill in the gaps. It's not as easy as it appears because they have to do something with an assigned group that's responsible for painting and treating the surfaces for a tennis court. So it's not something like the highway group can just come in and do for us, but kudos, nicely done.
Looks very nice.
And I think that is...
Yeah, the highway department puts curves in the wrong direction on everything they do.
Well,
You
the
want
curves,
straight
I'm not letting them
lines,
touch any more curves. That's the only thing we're going to have to get the checklist from now on.
Might be why he's not here tonight. No.
All right.
That'd be it. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. Pete?
So I would start by giving Nick my congratulations too. it's been a real pleasure getting to know you and working with you, Nick, and I've just been very impressed, and I was thrilled to see that you beat out people with decades of experience in town administration, so well-deserved job for you, so congratulations. I too was just so glad to see North Street getting paved. It's such a difference. Driving down North Street now is just a pleasure. I rode my bicycle to work on the weekend, and it was really nice to bike on North Street, so that's great. I've got office hours on Friday at the center if anybody wants to come and talk from 9 to 10. And that's it for me.
Well, I'll add my congratulations as well. Nick, you've made a big contribution over the last couple of years, and aside from that, in the 3 years you've been here, you came in really good, but you've developed a lot, and I think probably one of the places that's the clearest, two of the places that are clearest to me are certainly the development committee and some of the involvement you've had with that, but more directly this community choice aggregation committee. Sometimes people keep all this stuff going smoothly, and they don't always see them out front. They just kind of like, everything's covered. And I think that it was pretty clear to me that you've played a big role there. And you've also, in things like the town meeting, being able to handle questions from the field. You'll do a lot more of that, I'm sure, in Milton, but being able to do that in a way where in a large group of people you can give people a coherent answer to a question that you didn't necessarily know was coming with a level of detail and explanation that makes it easy for them to understand. That's a skill. And I certainly wish you all the best, even though I'm sorry to see you leaving Medfield.
Thanks.
North Street, I kind of miss the asteroids game I used to be able to play. It's like, I know if you go way over to the right here, you don't really bang your wheels, but it is a very nice job. It is sort of a pleasure to go down a nice smooth street with all those nice bright stripes and everything. So it was a great job and done pretty quickly.
Oh, yes.
Very quickly.
I can say, I think I already did say this once in the last meeting, even before that, when they did the chip sealing projects, I drove around to check that out. When I first got elected, that first summer was the first chip sealing I think Mo had done, and it was like one of the very first, citizen calls I got from someone up on Granite Street that was all worked up about all the stones that were being kicked up, and so I deliberately went down over to Longmeadow and Evergreen around there right after it had been done. It's like, they figured something out, because these stones aren't all there. That's the street sweeping and everything is really a pretty good job. Yeah, it really was good. Outside of that, it's been a quiet month. I have a couple of individual issues that people have called on. The most comments I've gotten have been around dog control, but there are a couple of other items where people have been calling in looking for a little help with some of the things in town, and trying to do those quietly and figure stuff out. So outside of that, no major meetings. Don't have anything else. With that, does anybody have any other issues? I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And thanks to the crowd for hanging in to the bitter end here, 10:25. Thanks to Medfield TV for broadcasting this. There's probably like 1.5 people that are watching at this point, but it's yeah. We forgot to give you your vacation report. We really should have
that's
brought you
right.
up.
Darn it.
I would have brought some stuff back on the county train.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with that.
All right, we'll see you on the 30th.